have you, through your research, had people reach out to you? Have you spoken to people and learnt things that you have promised you wouldn't share?
Yeah, there's stuff that I've been told. If you're going to knowingly lie, you got to start to question why. They zapped the plane out of the sky. It's called time dilation. Einstein's the one that taught us we're all in our own little bubble. Piece of shit, scum of the world. Nobody should go on Julian Dorey's podcast. I don't know why he's podcaster, biggest snake in the world. Why did none of the 4 emergency transponders go off if the plane crashed? This was a message to China.
Before we get into that and we find out what really happened to Mh370, I just want to know a little bit about yourself. Like, who were you before Mh370? Were you interested in UFOs? Like, how did you get caught up in this?
Yeah, well, I am just a healthcare IT consultant. It's all I've ever really been since I graduated college. I went to school for business, and I graduated with a marketing, finance, international business majors. And I just got interested in healthcare because all I've ever really wanted to do is try to help people, help fix the health industry in the United States. And in terms of the UFO phenomenon, I didn't really give it too much mind. Like, I considered it like ghost story type stuff until around 2017 when the Tic Tac, Gimbal, and Go Fast videos were officially said to be legitimate. And that's when I realized, oh, wow, there really is something here. Even the officials are willing to throw this bone out there that is, we've got stuff flying around that's unidentified. And the other thing that was compelling about that for me was that they were in FLIR, forward looking infrared, which at the time I had no idea what that was. I mean, I'm just a normal guy. I don't even, at the time, didn't even understand, like, this light spectrum, and wavelengths. I didn't really even understand any of that. So I thought, wow, this is pretty incredible footage, and just kind of followed along and watched it ever since then. And never really participated in any serious way. Never went to any conferences, conventions, or anything. But I've seen like all the popular videos that are out there. I think the one that I think is one of the most interesting ones, the Turkey video, where they claim you can see the people inside the craft. I disagree with that assessment, but I still think that footage is pretty incredible. So yeah, and then in 2023, in August of 2023, is when the MH370 videos reemerged. Now, they've been posted before. I don't know how many times, but they've been posted since 2014. I think I got serious about it a couple days in when I realized how compelling the videos were. Just based on the amount of analysis that was being done, nothing had ever happened before or since in the UFO community in terms of like videos coming out that had so much evidence that supported them, but yet no chain of custody, like true actual leaks.
So these videos were already out there and there were other people doing kind of analysis and research on it. Is that what you're trying to say? And you kind of just took it to the next level?
Yeah, that's a good assessment of it. So in August, for about 2 weeks, between August 7th and August 19th of 2023, is when the videos were posted. People started to take them seriously. People dug into most of the details around the history of the videos. And if I were to estimate, hundreds, if not thousands of people reviewed them forensically, like frame by frame in video editing software. So you have to realize, if there was anything wrong with even a single frame, like, oops, somebody left in this Pikachu on this frame, or I'm pointing out something like really obvious, people would have caught it. They would
Yeah.
have caught it. And then people started weighing in that were like at least claiming to have pretty strong credentials. The one that I bring up a lot is the Top Gun, like, senior producer or effects artist or whatever on there, that didn't just say how difficult it was, but explained what they had to do in Top Gun Maverick to scale down the size of those planes for the shots. Is that it's so difficult that they like had to use other methods for that. So when we see in these videos, two videos from two completely different angles of the same event in perfect synchronization, and the size of the plane in the satellite video is scaled appropriately to something that's being filmed from very far away. And the drone videos scaled appropriately to something that's looking at it horizontally. And the best part, probably the hardest part, is when the drone goes underneath the wake of the plane. You can actually see the plane shrink as the plane rapidly gets further away from the drone and turns and banks correctly. Just to get that so that your eye, so that it looks real to a human when they are looking at that, extremely difficult. And that's the reason why the videos look so accurate. So yeah, there was a lot of evidence in there that people had already found out that, these videos are showing an authentic event, and then they weren't getting any attention. In fact, there was Debunk. There was a debunk by Newsweek that I think came out on August 9th of 2023, because I remember debunking the debunk. And I just kept wondering, how is it that Newsweek has a debunk already out when only people that know about this what's happening are the people on Reddit that were following it, and nobody in the mainstream media would ever was talking about it. It wasn't until August 15th or 14th. There's a post out there where I had begged the media to look at these videos. Like, how are you not talking about these videos? Like, it's not just videos of UFOs or something anomalous. That's really MH370 in those videos. Like, people are like, we've been looking for this plane, it's this giant mystery. And now we've got these videos that are dated back to when the plane disappeared. Like, this isn't rocket science here. No one was paying attention to them. I did not want to be any of the shit that I'm doing right now. But the reality is, I was forced into this position. I said, okay, I'm going to be the journalist that's going to review it. I'm going to become an investigator. And that's how I got to this point.
So can you just explain, you said the videos resurfaced in 2023 and that's kind of when you took off with investigating it. But part of your sort of research is that these videos were actually posted within, 2 to 3 months of MH370 disappearing. So how did you find out that these videos actually date back to being posted online back to 2014?
Yeah, the first details is finding the Wayback Machine. So the
Can you explain what
collective
that
group,
is?
yeah, the collective group of Reddit, essentially, or all of social media, was Reddit, Twitter, and 4chan at the time. The Wayback Machine collects pages either that have been manually selected to be archived, or I don't know if there's an automatic crawling process that it does, but you can go look back at the history of any web page that's out there. So I don't know what methods people use to search through it, but they're pretty damn elaborate. I don't know how people find stuff that has been, basically scrubbed off the internet, but it's on the Wayback Machine essentially. And the Regicide Anon YouTube account had been scrubbed, but it was on the Wayback Machine. And so the oldest version of the videos we could find both come from the same source. There's clearly a story being told here. This isn't a situation where like one person got the videos, or the videos were like given to like 5 different people. Like, Regicide Anon's story is the earliest story, and it starts on May 19th, 2014, which is just 10 weeks after the plane disappeared, on the satellite video. And in the video, it says received March 12th, 2014.
So the
So,
satellite video was actually posted first.
and when it says received March 12th, 2014, that's the end of any discussion of whether or not that's MH370. No question whether or not the videos are real or fake. That in that video, that's MH370, or at least representing to be MH370 in that video. Because I want to address that. Sometimes people say, how do we even know that's MH370? Well, that's the first way we know. And then we looked at the metadata of the video, and it says Malaysian Airlines 370 or something like that in there. So no questions, MH370. And it says source protected. We looked at the other videos. People go, look, the other videos this person posted are fake, so that means this is fake. Actually, if anything, that means it's a real leak. Regicide Anon is not. They're not the hoaxer, and Regicide Anon is a neutral person. The fact that Regicide Anon is not the hoaxer is huge. Because then why did they put that the source was protected? This shows that this was potentially a leak. And then one last thing before I let you ask the second question. Then the second video says received June 5th, 2014, published June 12th. So now we have a clear story being told. Regicide Anon got this video somehow, the first one, published it. Right after they published it, it said, made a YouTube account or a Twitter account 3 days later, said, watch this video before it's deleted. And then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, They say, "Oop, I just got the drone video too. Alternate angle of the same event. Post that as well."
So it's
Zero.
the same YouTube account that posted both videos about 4 6 weeks apart.
Correct. Not even 6 weeks apart. No, 3 weeks, 2, 3. So first video comes out about 6 weeks after the plane disappeared,
Hmm.
and the next video comes out 3 weeks after that. So
Okay.
pretty quick.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Okay.
okay, so we can tell there's a story here being told. And the first video, honestly, when people look back at it, I know people say I'm cocky or egotistical or whatever. I'm just confident because I know this stuff's real at this point. I mean, there's no question it's real. So when people look back at it, they're going to say the first video should have been more than enough. I mean, the first video is smoking gun, nail in the coffin. We have satellite coordinates say NROL 22. That implicates the United States government. That's National Reconnaissance Office launch. That's the first launch of the space-based infrared system in 2006. So it also has coordinates. The coordinates are, we actually argued because we believe the fake story, the plane went in the South Indian Ocean. So we were arguing, trying to rationalize how there must be a missing minus sign in front of the north-south coordinate. Because if you put a minus sign in front of it, the coordinates are like pretty close to this supposed flight path, the Whisper flight path going down in the South Indian Ocean. And we're like, oh man, this must be coordinates in the South Indian Ocean. And the moment we let go of our preconceived biases, that what the media was telling us, and said, you know what? Maybe the plane didn't go in the South Indian Ocean. Maybe maybe those Inmarsat pings are fake. Said, what if there's not a minus sign in front of the coordinates? Boom. It's the Nicobar Islands. And it's a literal straight shot. Take a ruler, extrapolate the radar pings from the publicly released Malaysian radar. Take a ruler, it goes straight past the coordinates, like extremely close.
Okay. So I want to get into that, but I also just want to kind of go over it in detail because I'm sure there's a lot of people watching who haven't heard your story before, and I want to make sure that they're following along. So the current narrative given to us by the mainstream news, like you said, is that this plane crashed into the South Indian Ocean. However, we have like you've spoken about. First of all, there's no all planes generally carry a black box which give a or are meant to give a signal up to 20,000 feet cross depth. Right? We apparently that there apparently was no black box. Also, I know you've spoken about the fact that the Titan submarine that imploded. Can you sort of talk about the fact that how there's sort of a contradiction in that story? And then I want to go into what you mentioned before, Lockheed Martin's Cyber system.
Yeah, and I want to point out, it's not my story. I'm not asking people to believe me. I don't care what the story is people believe. Everybody just demands I give a story, so I give you my opinion, I give you a story. I'm just presenting the evidence. The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. You wouldn't even need a fraction of this evidence. You could prove this in a court of law. The black boxes, yeah, we didn't find any black boxes when they searched down there. Should have easily found the black boxes. It was not too deep. Black boxes are rated for like 20,000 feet or something like that. Should have easily found it. If the pilot wanted to make the plane disappear, he would have flown to the Mariana Trench, not down randomly in the South Indian Ocean after turning west either. The thing you should worry about, though, is the ELTs, the emergency location transponders. There's 4 of them on board that plane, and they're redundant, and they can't be deactivated. Doesn't matter what you turn off. Nothing can turn off those transponders. None of them went off. Pretty simple. The plane didn't crash. That's the question people should be asking is, why did none of the 4 emergency transponders go off if the plane crashed? And people just go, because they landed it perfectly in the water without the plane coming apart or something like that. And then you point out, oh, well, the flaperon, the one that washed ashore in the Reunion Islands, they looked at it and turns out there's like a pin in it to be where you can tell if it was deployed or not. And it wasn't deployed. So it was not a controlled landing in the ocean. And then with respect to the Titan sub, plus, by the way, when a plane the size of a Boeing 777 hits the ocean, it's going to rip and then barrel roll the moment one of those giant wings, which are 100 feet long, by the way. Each wing is 100 feet long. Once it hits the wave, going to rip. That thing's going to be 1,000 pieces. There's no avoiding it. There's no Sully Sullenberger for a Boeing 777 in the ocean. And then the Titan sub. If the plane hit the ocean, period, the United States Navy knows exactly where it is, period. They have something called the SOSA system. This system is so obsolete, it's already been declassified in the 90s. We used it to pinpoint the location of every single adversarial sub without them knowing it. It has a hydroacoustic system. Anything that hits the water, they know about it. The Titan sub is a perfect example. It was awesome. Well, I mean, it's not awesome this happened, but it was useful for the investigation because we found out the Navy's willing to lie, that they have pinpoint accuracy about that sub. People were lying about, or people were saying on, CNN and MSNBC and what have you, oh, they have 48 hours of oxygen left. We have to find out if these people are at the bottom of the ocean. The Navy knew that sub imploded days earlier. And they only said something 5 days afterwards. 5 days after, they said, "Yep, we knew where it was, and we're sending people there." And they went and immediately picked it up. They knew exactly where the debris was on the bottom of the ocean.
Why do you
So
think they did that? Why do you think they did wait 5 days to say that?
that's a great question. Honestly, I think it comes down to control of information. And I think this is what people need to understand is that information is so heavily controlled and the bureaucracy and red tape is so strong in government. That's what allows them to be secret. It's secret to a point of inefficiency, and that's what leads to a lot of um, the inefficiencies that we have in government as well. But it can be very good from a secrecy perspective. So the Titan sub, we know they have this acoustic system, and that system, again, SOSIST, that was declassified in the 90s because it's obsolete. They have better stuff now. So and just to point out, there's a Cardiff University scientifically peer-reviewed published paper, May 2024, that showed that under any trajectory, even on a slow descent into the ocean, that Boeing 777 is going to register on the Richter scale and is going to be picked up on the hydroacoustic. They even compared historical events to prove, no question, this should have triggered hydroacoustic signals on multiple hydroacoustic detectors that were in range, and neither of them picked up any along the flight path whatsoever.
And that's what I find the most interesting, right? Is the fact that we've got these extremely advanced sensor systems, not only in the ocean, that are for the military's defensive capabilities and surveillance, but also from space, right? The Cyber system, which there's that great video that basically demonstrates that the entire face of the Earth is essentially surveilled and monitored by a network of satellites, essentially 24/7. So you've got this acoustics detection system in the oceans. You've got these satellites beaming onto the surface of the Earth 24/7, like a live feed, essentially, which is, I guess, where you're sort of saying the satellite video came from. So at the very least, given that we know we have those two technologies, right? Both of those, the Cyber system and the um, acoustic detection system in the ocean, are public knowledge. They're not classified information. I think if people aren't at the very least willing to believe that the plane was teleported, I think people need to at least be open and willing to understand the fact that they aren't being told the truth. Because with the capabilities we have to detect and surveil, it's quite clear that we know where that plane is or what happened to that plane, and we just aren't being told.
Yeah. So we know they lied too. Now, exactly who lied? We know the Malaysian officials lied. The Malaysian officials were lying about. I actually posted on my Twitter earlier today a pilot that was one of the search pilots, and he knew that they were lying because they were saying, and the media was saying they were searching in the South China Sea, and everyone was saying, "Oh, the plane disappeared in the South China Sea." There's actually still some conspiracy theories that think the plane was like flown in the South China Sea or something. They admitted 5 days later that the Malaysian government did that the plane turned back and went the other direction. They were searching the other direction the whole time. They were never searching in the South China Sea. They were just pretending to search in the South China Sea, and they were literally lying. Knowing lying as a definition is, they knew that plane was not in the South China Sea, and they were telling people that they were searching there. So if you're going to knowingly lie, you got to start to question why right away. And when you look at the data that came out right away that was then changed, the time the plane disappeared was 1840 UTC. That plane's in the Nicobar Islands at our coordinates at 1840 UTC. Just to piece that together. And they know exactly what happened. To point out, we found the satellite. So we checked every single satellite in the sky, not just United States, China and Russia too. At the time, USA 229 was the only one, 1840 UTC, when the plane would have been at those coordinates. It is staring right down at the coordinates. And it's got a sister satellite. It's not just a random satellite. It was launched in 2011, so it's high tech. And it's got a sister satellite next to it, and they're Naval Ocean Surveillance Satellites, NOS.
Is this the thing that you've posted recently? That little that animation that you've sort of had
It's
up the
actually
last
from
few.
early in the investigation. I just reposted it because I want people to see how incredibly overwhelming the evidence is. This was something from September and October in 2023. That's how old that is. It was actually a guy named Martin who had the satellite tracking. He found the stuff on the internet because he does it himself, and he modeled them in the software with the real stuff that you can data check, you can fact check it. And we actually had people peer review and fact check the satellite location, and it was 100% legit in that location. And the purpose of those NOS satellites is tracking airplanes and boats as well. And they're Navy satellites as well. And this is a military operation I'm going to get to in terms of what I believe happened to the plane.
Right, and this essentially is proving the fact that there were surveillance satellites from the U.S. Navy right over where where it seems like the satellite footage is taken from.
Yeah, it's a big coincidence that we have satellite right there at the right time and the exact kind, too. It's a low Earth orbit satellite. And once you know they lied, it's easy to show how they did it because, like, we found the satellite. Oh, it's right there at the exact time. I researched how all these satellites worked over the last 2 years. Sibers actually is looking for heat signatures. So it's basically looking for flashes. And then what it's doing is there's AI that's all this data is being relayed to ground based computers, and AI is sorting through it and going, oh, there's a target, like maybe a missile launch. And then it does like a threat assessment. And if so, then they have the low Earth orbit satellites that can then track the object. So they have low Earth orbit satellites that can actually like track that missile or something after it's been launched and its trajectory and stuff like that. It can also be used, of course, for tracking airplanes. And it's much more sophisticated. We're not just staring down through the satellite. These low Earth orbit satellites are moving way too fast. If you want to know more about it, they called it Sibers Low, and then they changed the name of it. So it's like Space Tracking and Surveillance System. But then like the name of the software they use, at least in the satellite video, we're confident now, I think, that it's Argus IR, which is a whammy footage capability that's not optical, that's infrared or multispectral. And this takes, at least the optical version takes multiple photos and stacks them together digitally to produce real time video playback. So this is doing something similar, but with infrared sensing. So it's already getting closer to a situation where it's something like in the Dark Knight, where it can just pull data from phones. But in this case, they're doing it from satellites. They could also potentially use that. It could be getting produced by a drone or a high altitude plane as well. But I think that the most likely thing is that it's a satellite video because it's literally what it says in the description as well.
So I want to get into the thermal video and the satellite video, and I want you to sort of break them down for the audience. But just before we do that, can you just kind of give me a concise summary on what your theory is that happened to this plane and what the technology we're seeing in these videos is?
Yeah, I think it's a U.S. military operation. I mean, it clearly is based on the videos. Why are they recording? There's only one answer. It's U.S. military operation. So that's your answer. Why are they recording? Why are there assets there? Why is any of this stuff happening? That's a U.S. military operation. The drone is extremely close to the plane. Drone flies underneath the wake of the plane. You can see the smoke stacking up when the drone flies into the wake of the plane. The smoke is one of the biggest clues. People noticed right away there was a heat signature in the belly of the plane when the drone zooms in, and that was an indication. People wondered, is that a fire? Does that mean there's a fire? So it turns out there was 500 pounds of dangerous lithium ion batteries on the plane, and they were several stacks of them were in the forward cargo bay, which is like almost movie villain. Like that's the exact location you would put them if you want to cause them to like damage the electronics bay. That's exactly where the electronics bay is at. And so it's not a situation where the plane itself is on fire. It's not like, oh, this plane is on fire. Like if you were in a car and you saw a car on fire, it's the batteries inside the cargo bay that were on fire, and they damaged either the circuitry or just the electronics itself. And when the plane goes dark, that was when the fire knocked out the plane, or the alarm had just gone off, and then the pilot would have pulled the main bus and made the plane go dark, one or the other. And then the pilot takes manual control, turns the plane back around, flies low because there's going to be smoke building up in the plane, and they know they got to vent that smoke out and they got to get oxygen in there. So they actually would have depressurized the plane, but not to knock everybody out. They would have flown low, and this is actually corroborated by all the witnesses. All the public witnesses all corroborate this event, like fire, seeing the plane flying low. And then it went to the nearest airport, Penang. Uh, didn't land, but we know they were low because the co-pilot's cell phone pings the cell tower. So you have to actually be very low for that to happen. So there must have been a reason why they couldn't land, presumably in an emergency event. My guess is that, like UPS Flight 6, they couldn't see. They had no light, they had no power, they had no headlights. So it was extremely dangerous for them to try to land. And their plane was on fire, or at least there was a fire in the cargo bay. And they had a bunch of fuel on board as well. So anything goes wrong, plane's going to explode. And I think they got a rendezvous from the U.S. Navy that said, go to these coordinates and we'll try to land in the water, because ocean landing, theoretically, the plane may be less likely to explode. And that the U.S. Navy said something like, we'll fish you out of the water when you like try to ditch the plane in the ocean. Like they'll try to pull a Sully Sullenberger or something like that. And it turned out there was U.S. Navy exercises in that area going on at the time. So it kind of makes sense. And so they rendezvoused at this point, and then we see these videos. And it turns out the whole thing was an operation, that the United States set the fire, that wasn't an accidental fire that happened on board the plane. Although there's a narrative where it was an accidental fire and this is some kind of rescue attempt. It's just not enough time to deploy the assets in that case. You only have 1 hour and 20 minutes from when the plane goes dark to when we're seeing the plane on the videos in the Nicobar Islands. 1 hour and 20 minutes. Can the United States military or whoever deploy these drones and what have you, even if they're close by, and intercept the plane in 1 hour and 20 minutes? Maybe. But instead, I think they set the fire on board that plane intentionally the whole time. And this is why the cover up, because this was an intelligence operation the whole time, and then they had to lie about it. So they set the fire. They knew the plane would turn around. They either knew or suspected the plane would not be able to land, and then they diverted it. There's also a narrative here where they could have remote controlled it. There's Field McConnell and Captain Dan Hanley have promoted that narrative. Could be possible. There were AWACS that were potentially in the area. One of them could have been the drone. Another one could have been a spy plane that the leaker of the videos, the person who eventually leaked them, was on. And the orbs then, why you do all this? This is basically now an espionage or counter espionage play to some degree. And when we looked at the passenger manifest, the thing that stuck out the most was the 20 Freescale semiconductor engineers, like by far. That's got to be the reason. You look at this plane, there's just those people, they have a huge target on them. 8 of them are Chinese nationals, 12 are Malaysian nationals, and they work for the American company Freescale Semiconductors that builds microchips, and they were connected to U.S. aerospace and defense, and they were working on advanced superconductive microchips. I mean, to me, that's no question. That's it. Now, what's the exact narrative of the exact reason why those 20 people? I don't care. I really just don't care. Is it a message to China? Is it because those people have some specific information? Is it because one of them is a super VIP? It doesn't matter, man. It literally doesn't matter. They zapped the plane out of the sky. The person that's going to have to answer that narrative is the United States government. Why did they do that operation? Why did they risk it? Why did they film it?
I think the passengers on the plane is definitely a very interesting part, but I wanted to just pull back a minute. You sort of mentioned the fire on the plane. So you also mentioned witnesses. So you believe that this fire, this lithium fire that took place in the cargo bay of the plane, was intentionally sort of the lithium was put there for this intentionally beforehand? Like this was a setup? Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, I mean, lithium-ion batteries fires were extremely dangerous, especially we only started to learn about them actually in the early 2010s, and several planes burnt up because they had them in the cargo bay, and they ended up banning them. The exact time in which they banned them depends on the jurisdiction. There's been some arguments over this, so I'm going to be careful about my wording, but basically everywhere has banned them from the cargo bay of passenger planes. As in, I'm not just meaning like, hey, you can't have your cell phone. I mean, like, you can't use it as cargo. They were carrying 500 pounds of lithium ion batteries unsafely stacked up. So plane disappears. You see these videos where the plane's being zapped away. It's hard for me to imagine any world in which the fact there was a fire on the plane is coincidental to the fact that we're watching the plane get zapped away while the United States government's recording it.
So
Plus
this
the fact
like
that, like, I want to point out one more thing is that when you realize there's a cover up at point of this play, and you realize the United States government, like you said earlier, must know what happened to the plane, then we reach a point where it says, okay, there's no way whatever's happening anymore is not coincidental anymore. So if there's a fire on board this plane, it's got to be connected to this operation.
right, and so yeah, you're essentially implying that this illegal amount of lithium was placed on the plane beforehand with the intention of this happening.
Let's not call it illegal. People will nitpick over that. Certainly not illegal. They claim that it was safe. The facts are around it are this: is that if it was packaged safely at the time, it was allowed to be on the plane at the time. It has been banned since then and no longer allowed. The They lied about the fact that it was on the plane. They said there was no dangerous cargo on the plane until March 20th, 2014. This was after they had already developed the narrative. A week after they had developed the narrative, 2 weeks after the plane disappeared, a week after they developed the narrative, the plane went in the South Indian Ocean. They then come out and admit, Malaysian Airlines CEO admits, oh yeah, there was 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries that were put together that day, which means extremely prone to potentially having defects in them, and unsafely packaged and put together. And later on, we would find in the forward cargo bay right next to the electronics bay. So, you do the math.
And you mentioned before witnesses. This is people who saw the plane.
Mike McKay is on an oil rig, sees the plane on fire at the exact time that it goes dark. People try to say he was too far away. Those people need to learn the definition of refraction. It was hot and had just rained, so actually it was ideal conditions. And with refraction, he would have been able to see the plane on fire. And because of how far away he was, it would have looked like it was right above the water when actually it would have been in the sky, because it would have been kind of an optical illusion because of the distance. So it's funny because that's the reason why his sighting got misreported as him seeing the plane crash. And there was a bunch of people saw the plane 10 minutes later flying low. They were on fishing boats. You can find those people as well. Um, there was also a bunch of people on the coast that heard loud noises the same time Mike McKay saw the plane on fire, the same time the plane went dark.
So are these people like on record? Like, is there video of them speaking
This
about
is
this?
all you can find this in CNN articles. This is all just from mainstream articles, not me like going to Bravo, whatever the Russian websites are, whatever Russia Times or anything like that. This is all mainstream stuff. I tried to find other witnesses. There are a couple others in like Kotabaru, which is the city on the East Coast, like where the plane just went dark, and a couple of people there saw the plane on fire, what have you, but not as well documented. And then the last witness is the star witness is Catherine T. She's had unimpeachable sighting. She was on a boat, landed in Phuket in Thailand a couple days later, and didn't know, at that point she had kind of heard about MH370 and realized, oh shit, I saw the plane. And she went back, looked at the logs, realized, yeah, I definitely saw the plane, no question. And later on, we find out looking at the flight path from the radar, she definitely saw the plane. Went right past her. There's no way she couldn't have seen it. And she saw the plane glowing orange, no lights, with black smoke coming off the back of it, flying low as well. It would have been a very unusual sighting. And the glowing orange, this was the moment I realized. I still remember reading a Reddit comment, and it said something about bromine in the Halon 1301 fire extinguishing gas. And I went, wow, that's a very specific chemical. And I looked it up. and bromine is an orange gas that has this very like viscous kind of feel to it. So almost certainly what happened is there was the chemical reaction from them using the bromine for an hour was released, or the halon 1301 was releasing bromine, and it was causing this misty halo around the plane, this orange misty halo, which also would have meant that it's that bromine is going to be getting pumped out probably from the AC exhaust ports like the smoke was, and went so far as to find out the way the smoke was coming out of the plane was that in the forward cargo bay. I actually talked to a couple of people who at least claim to be engineers. Their data seemed good, at least. That the smoke would have been pumping through the air conditioning system from the forward cargo bay, going through the plane and building up in the plane as well. So people might not even notice because it would have been like slowly building up. It would have been getting hazier and hazier. And then the smoke would have been getting pumped out of the AC exhaust ports that are near the landing gear on either side underneath the plane. And now, if people go look at the thermal drone video, when it's zoomed in, slow it way down, watch the heat signature change. That's smoke coming out of those AC exhaust ports, wrapping around the hull of the plane on both sides. And that's why it looks like two contrails. But you'll notice if you look at the drone video, you can tell it's not coming from the engines at all. It's not even lined up with the engines. It's actually offset from the engines.
I'm just thinking about like what you just said there about how some of the witnesses saw the plane glowing orange, but in that thermal video, the you're right, like the only heat signatures you do see are kind of like it kind of looks like they're from the engines, but I understand you're saying that it's not quite. If the whole plane was glowing orange, like should that reflect on that drone video?
Yeah, maybe I'm saying it wrong, and that's why I don't like to nitpick over the exact word usage because people interpret different words differently. So people say, and this is why I got into the big thing with Danny Jones and some of those guys, right? Because
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
not
get
going to
into
get into
that.
arguments over, oh, could you see inside the windshield? Look, I'm not the witness.
Mm.
I'm not going to argue on behalf of the witness's personal sighting and what they saw, right? In terms of, oh, what could you have seen in the wind there, right? They're just giving their sighting, okay? So the facts are they were there in the right location. There's no way they couldn't have seen the plane. They were there in the agreed upon flight path. Simple as that, right? Now, in terms of what they saw and how they interpret it, you can go on to there. She's got a blog. It does not look like the plane itself was glowing orange. It's like a misty haze around the plane. So when you look at it, and it's not like a situation like, oh wow, look at this star in the sky. No, it's like you're seeing this dim plane, but you see this glow, like orange tinge to it. And you can imagine how weird that would look in the sky where you're like, huh, why does that look like an orange tinge around the plane, right? And that's why I think um, it's important to kind of realize that from what these witnesses are saying, it's just their context from what they saw on that night, and also we can't assume that everything they're saying is necessarily accurate. So if you're going to ask me too, like, did you see the orbs or what have you? What I'll tell you is that I spoke to her, Catherine T, and she still stuck to her story. What was that, nine
Oh, you've
years later?
spoken to her.
Mhm. Yeah,
Oh, nice.
spoke to her. She was the first person I got in touch with. I was afraid she was in danger. Little I know that nobody would really be paying attention to any of it. And I don't think I know she didn't realize anything about the videos because when I showed her the drone video, uh, I asked her if that's what she saw. I was like, "Is this what you saw? Does it look like what you saw?" Because at least if you had seen a silhouette of the plane, you'd be able to tell. And she said, "Well, no, it wasn't green." And I laughed because she didn't even realize the drone video was a thermal video. She
Yeah.
thought that was an optical video. And I went, "Oh, yeah, okay, well, just forget the color. Just like, does that look like what you saw?" She's like, "Oh, yeah, that's exactly it." I'm like, "Oh, okay, wow." And the reason why that's important is it goes to show that what she saw, the real witness, matches up with it. If that's a fake video, somebody made it so well that a real witness went, "Yeah, that's exactly what I saw." On somebody's fake
Yeah.
video. Think about that.
What? So you're saying that she saw the teleport part of it?
No, the teleport part. Now, here's the thing about this. This is fresh information. Is that part of this is actually not, but so she watched this plane in the sky flying low, and then she says she went inside. Now, this is what I'm going to add on: is there was somebody else in the boat with her. There was actually two other people. There was another crew person as well. So people wonder, why did she go inside and put the kettle on? She wouldn't put tea on. Probably because there was somebody else in that boat. And what I was told is the other person in the boat did not want to come forward at all. Never has come forward to this day. Take that what you will. And I was told the reason why. I'm not going to say the exact reason why, but it's a legit reason why. It's a let's say a personal reason why you could imagine why you would not, anyone out there would not want to come forward. And not, it doesn't have to do with like, oh, I saw aliens or anything like that. Just, you don't want to risk, like, I'll just say it is, you don't want to risk like personal stuff in your life, your family, etc. And if it is a cover up, some of these people are just literally scared, and they probably should be scared. So point being, she put the kettle on, she comes back out, the plane is gone. And what does she see? She sees an orange halo, giant halo is what she says. No plane anymore. Now, we don't know the exact period of time, how long she was in there. I'm not sure. But what I will say is this is the other part I was going to add on there, is that the Zap is releasing ultraviolet or soft X-rays. That's why it's black in the thermal video. It's a non-thermal release of energy. Incredible, actually. I'm not sure if that's actually conventionally believed to be possible. And that zap would not be visible. Ultraviolet light is not going to be, release of photon would not be visible to the human eye in optical spectrum. So that also shows that the satellite video is not an optical video, as we've long suspected. And Catherine T would not have seen some flash in the night sky. Also, the orbs themselves might be invisible. I'm highly, highly confident that they are actually, or can at least be invisible in optical spectrum. And that's why they record in thermal and infrared, is that they can only be invisible in one spectrum or the other, but not both. And if that's the case, she might have seen the plane. The orbs might even been around the plane. She might even see the plane disappear, and she might have just thought her eyes played tricks on her as well.
Just before we move on, I wanted to ask quickly, and obviously I don't expect you to reveal it, but have you, through your research, had people reach out to you? Have you spoken to people and learnt things that you have promised you wouldn't share? Things that really cement this case for you, but you, due to respecting people's privacy, like you just mentioned, aren't willing to share that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's stuff that I've been told, like, behind, there's still stuff, but I mean, in terms of stuff that would like change people's minds, not really. Just more stuff like, I mean, people in the UFO community might find it exciting. Oh, you talked about this person about that, or this person said that, like, that kind of stuff in general. Um, and let's see, I said stuff like, I saw an email that had like, Marco Rubio was one of the people that the email was sent to, and it was just basically like, the context of the email, without giving anything away, was that it was about the MH370 videos and about the technology, ball lightning technology, and the coming from the Soviets. And, this has been stuff that's been worked on for a while. And you just go, holy shit, Marco Rubio, the guy that's on TV talking about how the UFOs are a danger to our airplanes. This
Yeah, I
guy's
mean,
being
he's in that
serious about
Age
it.
of Disclosure documentary that's coming out soon.
And I want to say this about that email, for people that might say, oh, well, like, it was probably just an email that was like blasted to a bunch of people. No, it was a very select number of people, and almost everybody's email addresses ended in .mil. So no, it wasn't a situation where it was some random thing. It looked like a pretty kind of emails that people open. Now I can't prove
Dot
that he read
mil.
it, but
What is dot mil?
.military. Oh, you don't know that? Yeah, .mil is if you have a military government email address.
Right.
So yeah, if with those kind of extensions, then these it's going.
Yeah.
I'll let people figure out the types of people that are on there.
What I want you to tell me about is what happened to the plane. So it's been teleported. We've seen these orbs. If you could explain first of all, from a physics perspective, what you believe we're seeing happen with these orbs and where the plane has then gone to.
Yeah, and it could be annihilation, but I'm more increasingly confident that it is actually teleportation in the videos. The dance around the plane, I think, is the big giveaway. Like, why are the orbs spending so much time circling the plane, mapping it out? I've determined that that must be like a vectoring mechanism. Is that the way the orbs circle around the plane has to do with the direction of travel in which the plane is going to end up going. So, using the right hand rule, that plane's going backwards. And so they have another orb somewhere else on Earth that is quantum entangled to those three orbs. They're just abusing quantum teleportation, but scaled up to the macro level. In fact, it's weird because the orbs themselves are like scaled up atoms. When I call them double layer plasma, what I mean is that it's basically a positively charged center and a negatively charged exterior, just like an electron around a nucleus. And so the orbs themselves are also abusing something called condensed charge research or exotic vacuum objects, which is this idea that normally a positive and a minus and negative charges should come together and annihilate or neutralize. But through controlling of magnetic fields, they can keep the charges separated and not just keep them separated, but densely charged, like super densely charged and separated. Avogadro's number is this gigantic number that is basically like how many electrons could you cram into a condensed little area. So the answer is like in theory, you could get it like really, really, really absurdly high numbers. So these are like balls of lightning that have been through magnetic fields, through fluid magnetic fields moving the plasma around, have this stabilization happening. And after they have kind of triangulated the location of the plane relative to the fourth orb or wherever their destination is, then they change formations at like the last second. So they're spinning around the plane vertically, and then all of a sudden you see them blur in the thermal. And this is when somebody basically hit the switch, or the AI hits the switch and converts the movement of the plasma. And once that happens, they naturally come together. And when they naturally come together, imagine magnets. Like at some point, once the magnets get too close, there's going to either be a very powerful snapping effect. Either they're going to come together super fast, or they're going to repel really fast. And so you can imagine a situation where you have this in either scenario. What do you get? You get this extremely powerful electromagnetic flux. The way I look at it is I imagine they're all repelling. So like imagining two magnets jamming them together. But now these magnets are like, I don't know. I don't even know what the magnitude is. 10 to the 9 orders, higher than normal magnets. An incredibly high number. It creates an electromagnetic flux. Flux just being dense electromagnetic fields, so powerful that it electrifies the space-time itself. And normally this energy we have in space-time, it gets pushed out of that region because of this huge electromagnetic energy. And what this does is it creates true nothingness. It pushes away our reality, and we're looking at true nothingness. You would say, oh, like a black hole? Yes, exactly. That's why a black hole is a wormhole. They're pushing that away, that space-time away. They're creating that nothingness, and then space-time is contracting in on itself. And that's why you see this literal portal open up and then close in just 3 or 4 frames. And when you watch it in real time, it happens so fast it looks instantaneous. Because that's how fast they create this rip in equilibrium. Like imagine ripping a piece of paper and then putting it back together and like taping it back shut again. That's like what they're doing through this extremely powerful electromagnetic process. And the origin of that seems to be, well, let's not say the original origin, but the origin of my investigation was Salvatore Pais's patents, the US Navy engineer, specifically his high energy electromagnetic field generator. The Navy said that this patent, like they said that it worked, but it produced like this very small energy levels. But the way they like ended and concluded was like, yes, this would work if it was scaled up. But then we're going to say it like didn't work because it only produced this small amount of energy. And that's kind of exactly what you would say if like you're going to take it further, but it's not going to be public, you know?
I wanted to talk to you about him as well because obviously you've interviewed him, I think, a couple of times. He's been on Jesse Michaels as well. And from my understanding, is that, and for anyone who doesn't know, Salvatore Pais, he's an American aerospace engineer. I believe he's either employed by or is contracted to the US Space Force still right now, actively. And when he watched those videos of MH370,
I mean, what were your impressions when you saw specifically this video here for the first time?
Oh man, when I saw those orbs, I saw this thing, this one orb just start exactly what it's doing now. Just start to go around this thing. And all of a sudden it started join another one and then another one. And I said, oh my God, they're forming a bubble of non-ionizing radiation around this thing. There's no way. There's no way what's about to happen. I anticipated. Do you understand? I knew before that black hole happened. Let's call it a black
You
hole.
knew that was going to happen beforehand? Just
I
watching
knew
that?
that would happen. I knew that would happen. That's why
Really?
when I said, this is it. This is the Pais effect.
when he saw that, he was kind of like, yeah, I understand what I'm looking at here from like a physics perspective. Like he wasn't surprised and it made sense to him what he was seeing. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's U.S. Navy engineer, but I think he did do work at Space Force. Let's say I strongly believe him to be working on black projects, special projects that he can't talk about. And he has worked for Northrop Grumman before in the past as well. So he has history of working on with defense contractors on pretty advanced aerospace projects. And his reaction was probably one of the things that first shocked me. As somebody that knew nothing about the physics, really, other than, I mean, I knew basic physics, took high school physics, what have you, but not PhD physics, not quantum mechanics. Uh, and when I reached out to him, because I was just trying to find people who are physicists or engineers who might be willing to talk to what we're seeing in these videos, be able to tell if they're legit or not, because I was already at that point very confident the videos were real just from the investigative standpoint. And U.S. Navy engineer Salvatore Pais responded back to me like within 12 hours. I sent him an email and he's like, I didn't even have a podcast at the time. He told me to set up a podcast to talk to him. And I'm like, that's a weird response. I didn't know what to expect. And now I've become friends with him. I've spoken to him 3 times on my podcast. And I think the most compelling part, not only do I think all his patents are legit, not only do I think we're seeing the patents on display, not exactly the patents, but the same technology and science. The most compelling part was when I asked him, what was your reaction the first time you saw the videos? And when was the first time? And so basically he said after I emailed him, he went and looked it up and he saw the videos. And he said on the record on the podcast, I didn't expect this, by the way. It's not, none of my questions to him have ever been predetermined. And he said, I knew what was going to happen after those orbs were circling the plane. I went, wait, what? You knew the zap was going to happen? Because when I first watched the videos, I didn't know what the hell the orbs are doing. Why are they circling around the plane? And when the plane disappeared, I went, wait, what? Last thing I expected was for the plane to disappear, right? As a normal person. Yeah. So for Salvatore Pais to say he knew that plane was about to get zapped, I mean, how could you know that? How could you know that?
Exactly. And that's crazy. And I found that really interesting because, and this is sort of what I want to get into next, is that for the people who have tried to debunk these videos, and, we can get into what I think about that and we can talk about that. But what that is also claiming in turn is that the person who in their bedroom in 2014 was making funny planes app videos just for fun has also inadvertently replicated the cutting edge of like fringe quantum physics that is still not even in the public realm in 2025. So is that a coincidence that this person in this position worked for Northrop Grumman is saying, yeah, I know what I'm looking at here. That just happens to be replicated by some kid making planes app videos in his bedroom 10 years ago. Like just the logic and likelihood of that in itself says a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think you hit the nail on the head. Is just and not so you have to be a level of physics that is like fringe, but also PhD level. You have to now also be understand the engineering capabilities of a plane while it's been scaled down, like we spoke to before with the Top Gun Marvel thing as well.
Yeah.
And you also, just by the way, we never found that plane. So they also had to have been psychic because they made a hoax video about a plane being portaled away and the plane's never been found. That's the ultimate hoax. The ultimate prank is that the plane's never found. Chris Blaine would love to have, or whatever his name is, the David Blaine and Chris Angel. They would love the magic trick like that. Make a plane disappear and never come back. Um, and then again, we literally there's two satellites in the exact right location, at the exact right time, staring right down as well. I mean, I get why people struggle to believe it. So much bullshit is out there, especially in the UFO community. And especially during the drone fiasco recently, how many videos of airplanes did I see? To the point where people are arguing with me about the UFOs can transform are transformers that can transform into airplanes and shit. I'm like, come on, guys. So I understand why the debunkers are like instantly to jump on the skepticism side, and even a lot of people in the UFO community. But the reality is there's just an overwhelming amount of evidence, and there's no hoaxer. Like, it's not like somebody who's like, "Hey, I'm the hoaxer. Here's the files. Right? This is what I did." And it's not like, "Hey, we found the plane," either. So the reality is all the evidence lines up towards one hard truth.
And you believe that this plane, where it was teleported to, was a US base called Diego Garcia. Is that correct?
Well, the plane's being teleported to the west, according to the right hand rule. Also, according to it just actually looks like the plane was pulled backwards. When you look at the first frame of the zap, you can see what looks like the tail, they call it the vertical stabilizer sticking out of the zap, or like the reflection of it or something. Looks really weird. But it looks like it's being pulled backwards, and we know the plane's flying to the east because we have coordinates. We're looking at satellite coordinates, so we just map the satellite coordinates out. We can tell the plane's flying to the east in that video. So if it's going backwards, it's going to the west. Well, what's west of the Nicobar Islands? The Maldives. The Maldives, where that base, Diego Garcia. The one we just gave away the land actually recently. So how exactly did it get there? I don't know. Apparently they can teleport stuff, so it's gonna be really, really, really hard to tell exactly how they get something somewhere. But there was a bunch of islanders that saw the plane flying towards Diego Garcia in the early morning hours. So there's a bit of a time gap of a few hours where I just have no idea what happened. But I presumably the plane teleports to the west near Diego Garcia. They do whatever they have to do to take care of the plane and fly it south towards Diego Garcia. And um,
And that's how the fourth orb kind of comes into this all, because I don't think we've touched on that yet. Is that the whole thing about four orbs? Is that there are three surrounding the plane, but there must be a fourth orb, which is essentially where the other three snap to, and potentially the plane with it.
yeah, according to quantum mechanics, that would be the idea. And then to take even a step further, using engineering principles like electrical engineering. So imagine that the three orbs around the plane each have one electrical charge, minus one electrical charge, a negatively charge. So that's minus three total charge. So then on the other side, we would expect the fourth orb to have plus three positive charge. So that when the orbs collapse down, they equalize out. So that actually the orbs would dissipate when the plane reappears on the other side as well. And so essentially what it's doing is literally producing a wormhole, like a Einstein-Rosen bridge between 2 points. And when that happens, the charges just come together. So the reality here would be that you can actually teleport because all points in space and time are actually connected. They appear to be distance is just an illusion, essentially.
Yeah, as Ben Rich famously allegedly said, right? That's how ESP works.
We should probably listen into the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works directors. And that was in the 90s. He was saying that in the
Yeah,
90s. He was just
I mean,
ignoring it. He was probably being 100% legit or honest.
yeah, it's funny how people like to ignore the things that are kind of convenient for them to dismiss. But he said some crazy things like is again in the 90s, anything you can think of, Star Wars, Star Trek, we can do it. He said some crazy things, and there are a lot of people that back that up. But what I want to get into next is the videos, because I want you to just. We've kind of covered the satellite video. I think with that one, I want you to maybe just explain the whole Citrix session side of things. But just with the thermal video, okay, so the thermal video is a drone. So you believe that this is a US drone with like a camera housing unit underneath the wing, and that it's basically been flown there. It's not there by chance. That drone is there intentionally to monitor this operation that's going down. I just wanted to clarify that before we move
Yeah,
on.
so let's start with that then. Just General Atomics drone. We started thinking it was an MQ-1C, and still pretty confident it's an MQ-1C Great Eagle, but also could be MQ-9 Reaper. There's also an MQ-20 Avenger variant as well that the U.S. Navy uses. They all look really similar, but you can tell for sure it's General Atomics because it's got this chassis, whatever, that is very distinct on it. So that part we're sure about, and that implies directly U.S. Navy. Now,
Right.
theoretically, there's
And
other people that had those drones, but in 2014, around that time, yeah, it's U.S. Navy.
yeah, and I just wanted to say, because I want to just kind of jump in on a few things when I remember them, is that I see a lot of people, because you've got a lot of fans, a lot of people support you, but you also have a lot of haters. You have a lot of people who, you can almost just type the word MH370 on X, and it's like throwing blood in the water, and the sharks, they just appear out of nowhere. These people who, from my limited experience with it, is that it seems like there are people, they might even be bots. I feel like that might be more likely, that whenever you mention this, there are people who are so emotionally invested that it's like they monitor people talking about it on X. And when it gets talked about, they show up with these like 60-page PDF documents about you, trying to discredit you and debunk you. And I mean, I've looked at some of them, and they read far more like a personal character assassination rather than a debunking of information. Some of the things that they use to debunk in it are the fact that the wing housing that you can kind of see on the drone video and the actual plane itself matches up perfectly to a 3D model of that drone and of that plane. Now, why I find that hilarious is that these people obviously don't understand how 3D models work. Now, 3D models, especially like high quality assets, are modeled down to like the nut and bolt. Like the topology is literally perfect. Like people don't just say, "Oh, I'm going to model a plane," and then they just make a model that kind of looks like a plane. Like professional 3D modelers will take 10, 15, 20 reference photos of an object at all different angles, from underneath, on top, up close, further away, and they will model it down to the fine details, the tread on the tires, like the nuts and bolts in the rivets and the seams. So the fact that they are saying, "Hey, look, this model is the same shape as this plane, or this model is the same shape as this drone's wing and chassis," that's not a debunk. That's not a debunk at all. You're literally just saying that, hey, this model matches this video of a plane. That's like saying, just because you can find a reference photo of a real video, say you've got a video of a Porsche, just because I can find a 3D model of a Porsche, that doesn't make that video fake. But that's the kind of logic that seems to be getting applied to it. So I don't know if that's just like ignorance or informed, like a lack of education with how visual effects and 3D assets work, but it's a very poor attempt at a debunk, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, a lot of the debunk attempts were really, really bad, but that's just the internet in general. I mean, same thing happened with Sean Ryan when he just released an email. All he did was release an email, and you had people making debunk videos about how the email was fake, and they were sure that this part of that part had been edited, and there was just normal explanations for all of it. That's just how the internet is. It's ironic what you mentioned about the reference because there is no reference for the videos, and that's part of the reason why they're just unquestionably real is that when people do 3D stuff like that, that to make things look realistic, they use real models for it. That's the easiest way to make something look real. That's why you see people with the globes on their head and the green suits and what have you. Exact same reason. So there's no reference for the videos. But to the point, yes, like if a model of a General Atomics drone matches a real General Atomics drone, or a model of a Boeing 777 matches a Boeing 777, of course it does. Like, what doesn't mean?
That's right.
What are you talking
That's
about?
right.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Good luck trying to get that model of the Boeing 777 to like accurately represent the real flight characteristics of the plane while it's turning, while it's descending.
Yeah.
Uh,
Banking.
well, yeah, while the distance is moving too, while it's moving away from your camera.
And
Um,
not only that, because like this, let's if these videos were faked, right? They just must have had to have been done in a 3D environment. I mean,
oh
it's
yeah,
possible
no
to
question.
do them in a 2D, but it's such
It's
a
not.
hard,
It's
meticulous,
not.
long
Let's be
task
honest, it's
that it.
not possible. Like, if anyone thinks it's possible to do it in a 2D environment, just watch the first 10 seconds of the drone video where the drone goes underneath the wake of the plane wall, the plane is flying away from the drone, and the drone, and then the camera zooms in, and you can actually see parallax on the clouds. There's a 0% chance anybody did this in 2D 2D modeling. No chance. So anybody that tries to start with 2D stuff, like, right away, they don't have any idea how VFX works. And this is me without any formal training. Like, it's just basic common sense. And then in terms of the haters, I want to address that real quick too. Is that, first of all, I'm not surprised at seeing a lot of that stuff, because assuming the videos are real, that's exactly what you would expect. You would expect there to be a coordinated disinformation campaign to try to hide this stuff. In fact, people wonder, if the videos are real, why am I even alive? Well, it's kind of, I mean, how are you going to kill some random guy that randomly is saying these videos are real? I'm not an insider. It's not like I broke an NDA or anything like that. So, it would be, sure, and maybe they do that, but it would just Streisand things. And then I think the reality is, a lot of the haters are just kind of jealous. Some of them went all in on the videos being fake. A lot of these people too were just like, no one should even look at these videos because they're so obviously fake. And so now for them to be real, like, it's a huge blow to their credibility. So they now are emotionally invested in the videos being fake. And for some people too, it's just hard to accept because it's so far out
Yeah.
of the paradigm of what they were,
It's
taught to believe.
It's interesting though, because planes disappearing is not a new thing, right? I mean, the Bermuda Triangle is famous for it. I mean, planes and even ships have just gone missing. Obviously, we don't have any footage of how that happened, but planes gone missing is not a new thing. Even in my country, Australia, 1978, a pilot in a like a single engine Cessna was flying over the Bass Strait. I think his name was Frederick Valentich, and disappeared, never seen again, never found the plane. And that's 1978 is not that long ago.
Yeah, that's pretty long ago though. And do you know what do you, just without looking it up, guess the last plane to disappear?
Oh, no idea.
Mh370. So it hasn't happened since Mh370. So it's not that often. That was 11 years ago. So planes don't actually disappear. It's actually like real in the modern time era. It doesn't ever happen. It's unthinkable to think that a plane could just somehow disappear. The engines would have been transmitting data. You got the ACAR system transmitting data. They might try to argue the engines are using the ACAR system, but I doubt it. Um, that you're just communications that aren't necessarily going to be tied to the other systems. So, and then with all the satellites and all the other surveillance system, there's no way that it can happen.
But my point being is, it's interesting why people are so emotionally invested in these videos not being real, when at the same time, law of the Bermuda Triangle is socially accepted. Oh, there's this triangular space in this part of the Atlantic, I think, ocean, where ships and planes have gone missing over history. It's like it's law that people are just generally accept. And
Do
like I
you want?
said, there's that.
Yeah. So let me ask, because I'll just get ahead of the point here. Is that the answer is that the videos? Why did people not taking the videos seriously, even though they take much more ridiculous stuff seriously? That's really the heart of your question. And the answer is because of what they show. They're not showing aliens zapping the plane. They're showing a very serious crime that was committed. They're showing the United States government committing a covert operation, black operation on the plane. And we know now in retrospect that they covered it all up. It's like those videos are a time capsule and we missed it. So, what those videos imply is, think about all that you have to accept for those videos to be real. You now have to accept that the United States government is committing evil acts, criminal acts, where you could argue people, could deserve a death sentence for doing stuff like that in theory, or rest of their life in prison, that they're hiding super advanced technology, Star Trek level technology from the public. And on top of that then they lied about it, and they control the media to a level where no media asked any basic questions whatsoever that would expose the cover up. That's
I
all
think
the stuff you have to accept.
that, see, like, I think you have to accept that for the people who are kind of, deep enough into this, like yourself and people who follow your work, people maybe who follow the UFO topic have to accept that. But I do think that your average person who just doesn't believe this, I feel like most people are just caught up on the fact that, like, how could you, like, teleporting a plane is not real. Like, it breaks, just that very fact just breaks their mold of reality. So I don't even think people get to the stage of, like, it being a US operation, it being manipulated media, which I do agree with personally. But I think the big stone wall for most people is they just see, like, a video of a plane being teleported, and that is enough for them to just be like, okay, this is obviously bullshit. That's what I feel like is the big stone
Yeah,
wall.
I think you're right, and I just think that's kind of wild because it's completely untrue. It's untrue in every aspect. That hasn't been true for 100 years. Like, the reason why it's called a Einstein-Rosen bridge is because Einstein was one of the people that realized that it's possible. Like, Einstein's equations show that we can create wormholes. That's why Miguel Alcubierre created his warp drive metric in 1994. He just took Einstein's equations and said, wait, if this is true, we can make a warp drive by manipulating space-time itself. And by taking that to its extreme, you create a wormhole. Einstein was the one that taught us that a wormhole, that faster than light travel is possible. A lot of people think that Einstein taught us that we can't go faster than light. Actually, he's the one that told us that we can. Einstein's the one that taught us we're all in our own little bubble, our own little frame of reference, as he called it, which means no matter how fast I'm moving relative to you, in my bubble, the speed of light is still the speed of light, still a constant. But that can't be possible, right? Because if you can see me moving at a different speed than that, if you measure me moving at a different speed, then how can my speed of light be measured at a different rate? It's called time dilation. Time dilation is the answer. That's the thing that corrects this. And what it means is that if I had a twin and I went to a different planet that has a different amount of gravity, and I come back, are my age of my twin and I are going to be different. So this shows that faster than light travel is actually theoretically possible. It is not just science fiction. The only question is, what would it actually look like? Humans, we are just dumb primitives. That's what we have to realize. We're just dumb cavemen. We're not super advanced. We're just dumb cavemen. And it's like giving what we would think of as a caveman an iPhone and saying, hey, here's an iPhone, go use this. And then they would use it and go, wow, look how awesome this is. And then would run out of battery and they'd go, wait, how did that all happen? And imagine trying to convince another caveman that this phone was just turned on. You would never be able to convince them. They would think, they would laugh at you, would say that you're just lying, you're making this shit up. And then if you were to reverse engineer the iPhone as the cavemen, you might figure out the physics phenomenon of how the phone was possible. You might discover electricity. You'd be like, look at all these microchips. Maybe little metals somehow makes stuff light up, right? You could understand the physics, but you would never be able to rebuild the iPhone. Not for hundreds of years or thousands of years would cavemen be able to do it. What I'm pointing out is that people wonder, why have we not discovered everything yet? Because along with technological advancement comes the advancement of our tools, our material science. And these things go hand in hand like this. So this is the reason why we're constantly moving up a notch instead of going directly from cavemen that figured out fire to, flying around in warp drives. And so maybe if we did find something we reverse engineered from any source, maybe that's what happened. We found an iPhone like the cavemen did. We couldn't rebuild the iPhone. We could understand the physics of it. And then we could understand and build our own stuff based on the physics slowly over time. And even stuff that is eventually very magical. But we don't have the material science, the nanoscale technology or atomic scale manufacturing to produce something that they could potentially produce yet. But as we advance, so do our tools.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I like that analogy that you brought up there as well, because I've often cited something similar to that, in that as we do grow and we start to learn more about reality and we become a more intelligent species, obviously the technology comes up along with that. And I feel like, and I'm sure you would agree, that technology at some point, probably, from about 30, 40-ish years ago, has been started to become heavily suppressed. And the technology that's been drip fed to the public is controlled, but the technology that's going on behind the scenes is far more powerful. And not only that, it's still following Moore's law and doubling every 2 years and just exponentially going wild in the shadows. And my personal theory is that a lot of the issues that we kind of have in the modern world is because we have continued to advance like this, but the technology has not been allowed to come with us. And now there's this like great imbalance in like where we are at as a society and the technology that hasn't been allowed to come up with us. And I feel like that imbalance has kind of become like a pot that's overboiling and is about to blow unless, disclosure or something happens to bring back in that technological balance. That's just a theory of mine, that I've kind of been floating around in my mind for a while. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that the singularity, definitely, I'm all on board on that. And I think that they just hit the singularity earlier. And if you hit the singularity earlier, then even after a short period of time, it's going to seem like magical technology to somebody who's on the other side of it. And
100%.
in terms of how it happened, I think that's where things got out of hand with national security. The thing that you're going to find what I call the woke disclosure people still invoking all the time. Well, I don't want to harm national security. I want to tell you that aliens are real, but and blow the lid off the conspiracy, but we're not going to harm national security while we're doing it. Like, come on, get out of here. And once we started like hiding inventions from the Invention Secrecy Act, and most likely what happened is they use the Atomic Secrecy Act to hide all
Yeah.
this science, to like hide
Yes.
0 point energy in the way that we can amplify energy and get around the ultraviolet catastrophe and what we would think of as the limit of amplification. They just hit all that. They said this is too dangerous. In fact, I could even imagine being one of those physicists like 70 years ago and being like, "Oh yeah, we got to hide this. It's too powerful for
Oh,
normal."
for sure.
Like
For,
I could
for sure.
totally see doing it. And you're right. Like we just reached a point where it's gotten so out of hand now, where it's like we need to come back into balance. But now it's the technology is so advanced, we're like talking about reshaping our society just to handle it. Because like
Yeah.
50% of industries, just like all the energy industries, just become obsolete. Like they're
Yeah.
net.
That's how far it's gotten.
Mhm.
So let's sort of wind back to the satellite video. I want you to explain to the audience the big sort of revelation you had when you understood that what you were seeing here was not only a satellite footage of a plane being teleported, but that this was a citric session. So can you explain what that is and what that means and how you work that out?
Yeah, it was actually on the internet. Some people, I think it was Tacky NG, that put the pieces together. Several people found out different components of it, but it was actually the debunkers. A lot of the best evidence comes from the debunkers. Is they found out the mouse had a different frame rate than the background on the satellite video, and the background was 6 frames per second, but the mouse was 24 frames per second. Really weird. Why would the background be 6 frames per second? Well, now we know it's whammy footage. It's Argus IR. It's 6 frames per second because it's digital footage. It's not actual. If it was optical, there would be no frame rate limitation other than just the hardware itself. It's because it's taking all this imagery over this wide area of view. It's taking almost an unimaginable amount of data that's being processed, honestly. And so when we saw that, people realized that this indicates that it is actually a Citrix session that someone's logged into a remote terminal, a remote database. And so now everything started to make sense. From my perspective, it all made sense in terms of what we were looking at and what happened. What occurred here was that somebody was like me right now, logged on my computer or what have you, logged into the government's secret data website. Maybe that'll log in, or I think they have cards that they put in or whatever, like ID cards. Logged into that thing, they have access to it, which means they're extremely high ranking in terms of they would have compartmentalized top secret access. Let's call it like that, to have access to this database. And they did not. The reason why I freaked out is because I was already investigating, and I had realized the thing that I was on was the fact that it was not somebody recording a screen with a camera. That what we were looking at, because of the way the screen moves like this, we were definitely looking at someone doing a screen recording. What I didn't know at the time was we were looking at someone doing a recording of the window. Is that with this whammy footage, you press an area or you click on an area and a window will pop up. And they can have 100 simultaneous windows going on at a time for all the different users logged into the system. And they're all showing video playback and DVR. Like you can just have it rewind, fast forward, live, whatever you want. The person in this is not watching that live. They went back to the system, logged into it, and then they replayed the video. That's why they're following the plane, because they know what's going to happen. And they've cropped out the drone to make sure the drone doesn't get into view. And they're doing a screen recording on the window. And the frame rate discrepancy is because it's whammy and it's citric session. So to me, that was the ever in a million years and ever going to think to fake that into a fake video. Never.
Yeah, I want to talk about those points in just a sec, but why do you think the drone would be cut out? Why would they do that?
Well, the satellite video was the one they released first, so I think the answer is pretty clear. They did not expect to release the drone video.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that does make sense.
Like, just the fact that we can even answer and ask and answer that question shows the videos are real. If this was a hoax video, that would never be the case, because you're being told a story here. The story is clear. The story is they weren't going to leak the second video. That's why they cropped out the drone so you couldn't see the drone. They thought that just showing Mh370 with satellite coordinates of the real location of the plane should have been more than enough. The person that leaked that probably thought this is going to go mainstream. They're going to solve the mystery. It'll never get back to me, blah, blah, blah. And this goes to show we know who's leaking it. It's a U.S. military operator. The only person. Okay, so we need to have access to this footage. We need to know the footage exists. We need to know what happened to the plane. We need to have access to this footage and have the capability to get it off whatever secured server it's on. Probably they just recorded it locally on their local computer and then just put a USB drive and unplugged it. And they probably don't allow it anymore, would be my guess. But
there's a couple of things in that video, specifically the satellite video, that from a visual effects perspective, they just don't make sense at all. And I think the first one is, again, if we're following the theory that this is someone in their bedroom making funny planes app videos, like you see the mouse go across and they obviously are left click holding down and dragging the screen across, because like you said, this is obviously a wide picture that they are zoomed in on, and they can pull what they can see across the screen to kind of pan around the same way you do when you go on Google Maps, right? You can left click and you can pull the map around. It's like the same kind of setup. So to even have that kind of forethought and making that artistic decision in your video, if that's what you want to do, is just so like irregular and unnatural. And also, you've then also got the added decision of rendering your mouse moving at a different frame rate to that footage. Like, these are just two things that you just don't do. And I mean, that's not even talking about the whole like, oh, one frame of this stock asset matches the zap. You don't take one frame and manipulate it just a little bit, and then what did you do with the other frames of that asset? Like, you just didn't use them because they don't match at all. Like, there's just so many things that, like, logically, to an artist, someone like me, knows like it just doesn't make sense. But to the untrained person, they will see that one frame of that thing does look kind of similar. I mean, you can't deny that. But the fact that it's not the same, to me, it's almost kind of like a detective showing up to his senior sergeant trying to crack a case and being like, well, look, I found this gun. It kind of looks like the gun that we think did it. And your senior sergeant's going to be like, okay, but it's not exactly. And they're going, yeah, but it's really similar. It's really similar though. It's like, well, okay, cool. There's lots of things are similar to lots of things, but I mean, I get it, but it's just not it.
Yeah, great points on the things you don't do. I mean, when you lay that out there, it's just the way the screen gets dragged. Yeah, I thought it was a middle mouse click, but yeah, same idea, right? They're
Yeah, same
clicking,
idea.
and then what's happened? What you just said is super important to point out. So let me clarify: is that the mouse comes on from off the screen onto the screen, so we know there's a bigger field of view in the background. And that's
Yes.
what they're using to be able to move the screen around and change it around because they know exactly they can see the drone in the bigger field of view. And what's happening is that the mouse never moves when the screen moves. And so what this implies is exactly what Josh just said, is that they're actually they're not moving the mouse itself. They're clicking a button that's changing it from the mouse moving to moving the screen around. So they're using the same analog, but they're using like the right click or a middle mouse button to do that. There's no way in hell any hoaxer is ever adding that into any hoax video ever. And I want to point out now that we've been talking about this for a minute as well, that there's no such thing as fake hoax military videos. And there's no such thing as fake hoax military infrared and thermal videos. In fact, I've never seen any convincing thermal video ever. Not in movies, not in TV, never. Not one convincing fake thermal video, period. So maybe unless it's like, I don't know, what is that? The paranormal ghost hunters something or other, but nothing like that where it's, showing an operation or something. And the reason why it's so important is that imagine trying to fake a thermal gradient every single frame manually because there's no reference. There's like subtle changes in the temperature in every different frame, especially when you look at the heat signature in the center of the plane. And this is why, like, just do frame by frame. Like when you click through the heat signature in the belly of the plane when it's zoomed in, realize those are all completely unique frames in there. So what, somebody made all these unique frames, and then they attacked the zap. Why did they attack the zap? Because the zap is the thing that proves the videos are real from a scientific perspective. Because it's an ultraviolet and soft X-ray release of energy, it's exactly what's expected in a negative energy event, or let's say a negative refraction index event, like a warp drive event. They had to attack it. So what did they do? They did a reverse image search based on probably the individual frames, and then the reverse image search found some stuff that was similar. And they said, well, this one frame is like kind of close along this edge. What are the odds of that? Well, it turns out the odds are super high. We found 3 different random ones that have better matches along one little edge than what they found. And to your point, you brought a great point. People, they don't mention this. The debunkers never mention the stuff that like shows how full of shit they are. There's only 4 frames, 3 frames really, and then a little slight edge in the real zap. The stock effect, the video game asset effect they claim that was used, it has 7 frames. It doesn't even
Yeah,
have a number of frames. It's clearly not even in the videos.
yeah.
So
Again, these are the kind of things that, like, from an artistic perspective, if I'm just in my bedroom making videos, I'm not like, if I want to, if I'm sitting here going, okay, I need a zap animation for my little project here, I will go online and I'll find a zap animation. I'm like, oh yeah, that one works. Cool, chuck it in. I'm not. I'm not going to go in and like manipulate one frame, delete 3 frames from the end. Like, you just don't do that. You
no,
just don't.
and this is the thing. And then usually when I point this out to people, that's when they come back and say, well, you don't know how visual effects works. And then I laugh at them because first of all, I point out that we've gone from claiming that it's a perfect match to now we're changing the number of frames around. We're doing compositing to change the middle out that doesn't match at all, that nobody ever mentions on the one frame. And then I point out that, we also looked this exact Pyromania Shockwave asset up in real media to fact check the claim that people edited. It has never been edited at all, ever, in any of the ways that people argue. Never. And it's been used in major media, not like small media. Eastbound and Down on HBO, major hit show. Starship Troopers, major cult following. Anchorman, cult classic movie, all use this effect. And in every single one, it's little fire exploding. Looks like some stupid fire. It's definitely not in the MH370 videos. No random Banksy hoaxer that has better skills than major movie studios was like, I'm going to start doing compositing on this stock effect. So That one, actually, my true opinion on that was that I was shocked. It was August 19th when that debunk came, and that's what ended all the conversation about the videos. The conversation about the videos was banned off of Reddit after that, at least on the
Wow.
major UFO subreddit.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that people were falling for that. It was one of the worst debunks, I thought. Like, it was clearly not a match from the beginning. And I couldn't believe why people were pretending that it was. Especially
Yeah.
because I want to point out one more thing. These are things that generally don't get talked about that much, but debunkers had played this fake debunk card twice already before this. They had already attacked this app twice, claiming that it was a supernova that somebody included in there, and they were just looking for which supernova it was. They were sure it was a supernova. And then after they couldn't find that, they switched and they were 100% sure. There's even a Reddit post out there. I posted on my Twitter. They were 100% sure it was an ink blot. Ink blot effect, because it's black. So they were 100% sure
Yeah.
someone did an ink blot and effect, and they were looking for these effects. So when people point out like, "Oh, you're just stretching the truth," no, these people were literally doing reverse image searches, looking for effects to try to claim that was being used. They kept striking out, and then they went to this video game effect claim, which was also just a terrible argument to begin with. Clearly was never in the videos. But then they went all in on it and committed themselves to it, and now they can't admit they were wrong about it, and that's the world we live in.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, just before we stamp these videos and sort of move on to the next things, while we're talking about debunks, probably the biggest one that came out was the fact that the satellite footage that we're talking about now, where the clouds were panned, was the fact that this image of these clouds was actually from some kind of stock photo collection that was taken by an aerial photographer that people can purchase to use as an asset in their projects. Now, this was found in, I believe, a collection from 2016 or something like that. Can you explain just we'll try and keep this quick. Could you
So,
explain
so
the Wayback Machine and how that works with that?
Yeah, so the source of the cloud image is really sketchy. Like, in terms of how someone found them, like a days old Reddit account says they found it in a few minutes looking at this website. Makes no sense really at all. But the thing is this, is that the clouds clearly match. There's these cloud pictures, they clearly match the clouds in the videos, and like all the clouds. And maybe you have to do a little bit of stretching, but it's clearly the same clouds. Those are real clouds in the videos too. We know they are. So then the question is, well, which came first? So this photographer came forward, but they were coaxed by Redditor debunkers to come forward. Now they've deleted their video and gone into hiding, by the way, to claim that these photos come from a set of photos that he took on an airplane in Japan in 2012. Here's the reality. There are 5 photos that are in a set called Aerials 0028. They're claiming these 5 photos from this Aerials 0028 were actually part of a larger set that this photographer took from 2012. The problem is the Aerial 0028 doesn't exist on the Wayback Machine until 2016. And it was archived several times back to back when that happened. So to make the argument that it was just there and didn't get archived doesn't have a lot of weight to it, especially because we did confirm the larger set of Japan photos was archived in at least 2013, if not sooner. We have 100% proof we found images that are from that other set. And by the way, the other images in the set don't have the same cloud cover as the images in these 5. So either somebody had those images and they made the videos. And here's the thing. The photographer says they didn't make the videos. They don't have the skill set to make the videos. There's no reason to believe that they did. Then that means somebody had to have found those images online. And the only place they were even supposedly online was this Textures website. So they don't seem to exist in the Wayback Machine. How else can we find out? Well, we checked the torrents. The cloud pictures don't exist in the torrents either. So I can't find any evidence of them existing before the videos. And they do have metadata that claims they're from 2012 on them. But metadata can be changed in about 5 or 10 seconds. We changed it to show that they were from 2045 in under a minute. So metadata alone doesn't mean anything, because the only thing I can think of is that somebody in the military intelligence community took the whammy footage that was possibly already in picture form before it gets processed and put together, and they put it into a set of photos, or not even into, they created a new set of photos on the internet for it and just made it look like it was part of an existing set that was already out there.
Yeah.
And
they
they
just
did
kind
it
of inserted
after
it.
the videos were already. They knew the videos were leaked on the internet because at that point they don't care about the images being on the internet because the footage is already out there anyway. So they put it out there so that if the videos ever get popular, somebody finds these photos and they use it to discredit the videos. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. I mean, if those videos are real, I would expect them to do something like that. If I'm just being perfectly honest, I would expect them
Yeah,
to
of
do even
course.
more than that. The problem and the reason why it doesn't hold any weight is all the details that we just went over, plus the fact we have 2 videos from 2 different angles from different sides of the plane.
In
What's
sync.
the first requirement? We need a 3D rendered environment. How
Yeah.
can there be 2D cloud pictures? There can't be. And this was important because I want to point this out is that when that cloud picture debunk came out, the videos were at an all-time high in popularity and they were gaining popularity. And just before that, just days before that, we had shown that the clouds were moving and that like the orb went through the clouds and we were showing all this interaction with the clouds that would not be possible if the clouds were 2D pictures. And people ignored all of what we had just shown and went, yeah, it must be 2D cloud pictures. And I also want to point out one more lie. You'll hear a lot of people, this is clear propaganda and misinformation, disinformation, is that the people say the clouds are not moving. And the reason why this is disinformation is just look outside of the clouds. They never look like they're moving. So this is like one of those things that you put in people's heads because it sounds smart, but then when you think about it even for 2 seconds, you go, it's just the dumbest thing ever to say in the world. Because if we're looking at satellite footage, it's super far away and things don't look like they're moving when you're really far away. In fact, there's tons of videos from outer space looking at the Earth, and the clouds don't look like they're moving at all. Plus, the clouds are moving. Anybody that does any forensic analysis, like anybody that just puts the videos into an editor and just speeds them up, you can see the clouds not just moving, but evolving because there's wind shear at the top of the clouds.
So there's the open letter video that was directed to you that surfaced online. There's you appearing on the Danny Jones podcast, and then there's you identifying who the person is who leaked these videos. Can you just quickly tell me what order did those things happen? And we'll get into them in that order.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about it now. So definitely identified the leaker first, but it was around the similar time that the Danny Jones stuff was happening, and realized that the time his recording played was like a couple weeks probably after I was on the shows. Same with the Julian Dorey stuff. So like those were probably recorded in like October and then aired in November. So I was figuring out who the leaker was around the same time that all the Danny Jones, Julian Dorey stuff was going on. That's probably why it never got brought up in those interviews. Plus, those interviews were never meant to like look at the evidence. They were more of like trying to poke holes in the story kind of interviews.
So did you know that going into that? Like, did you expect to be, I mean, kind of attacked, for lack of a better word?
No, I had no idea.
The fact that you talk in such absolutisms as if it's absolutely
Isn't
real.
That what you're doing?
When you've been looking at it, I'm just questioning what you're saying. Like you're saying it's absolutely real. I'm saying Nico's video is very.
Here's that one. There's the only point that matches, and it's not even a perfect match. You can see all the extra dots that aren't there. I mean, people have debunked the hell out of this attempt. You can see that it's clearly not the same. So for everybody watching, judge for yourselves. You can see that these are not the same matches. And I mean, again, I'm a normal guy that came into this. I didn't really know how podcasting, the media worked or anything at all, actually. And those were like, other than the confessionals in person, those were the only other in-person interviews I had ever done. And the confessionals with Tony Merkel, super cool guy, just normal guy, normal thing. I didn't sign anything, just go in there, do the recording and be done.
So you didn't know that.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say you didn't know that Danny had organized this thing with the Corridor crew.
No.
And you mentioned Julian Dorey, who I know is friends with Danny Jones, but
they're best friends.
They're best friends, right? Because I didn't know that he was sort of involved in that story at all. So can you sort of explain kind of what happened on Danny Jones and how Julian Dorey was involved in it?
Well, I did a 6-hour podcast with Julian Dorey. It was more like an interrogation, to be perfectly honest with you, which I didn't really have any problem with because I'm a perfectly open and transparent guy. But there were several points in it that, I mean, I knew that I was kind of being set up in it. Like, why are you going out of this way to like try to nitpick various parts of the evidence. Just made no
Was
sense.
this before Danny Jones or after?
Yeah, it was before. Julian Dorey was like a week before Danny Jones, and they were both scheduled. And I didn't know they knew each other. And one of the first things they told me is that Julian tells me they're best friends. They talk every single day. Tells me that. And one of the other things that, and the whole conversation, the whole situation with Julian was sketchy from the beginning. Guy wasn't wearing a shirt when I get there. He's just like lackadaisical. It took like an hour or more to get started on the podcast. Like nothing was set up, ready to go. I spent all day with him there. One of the first things he tells me is that James Fox thinks the videos are bullshit, and he's like good buddies with James Fox, the UFO podcaster guy. And he's just throwing his weight around at me about all these people he knows. He literally called Jim DiOrio, a FBI legendary spook, and just put him on speakerphone in front of me because Jim DiOrio was like in the Maldives or somewhere nearby sometime when that happened. Like it was clearly just some kind of power play to like intimidate me or something, because I guess he thought I was full of crap. And then after all the whole thing's over, he told me he was going to have just to brag on me, because Julian Dorey is such a terrible piece of shit person. He, after all that, after putting me through the ringer, then he brags to me about how he's going to have a major studio recreate the videos, to which I'm just wondering, what is he even talking about? No idea. The situation was so bad, I was already ready with my like scathing review of the terrible time on Julian Dorey's podcast once I got back, which was clearly a setup. It was so obvious afterwards, but only in retrospect.
Did that air? Like, is there a version?
He ended up deleting the YouTube videos because he got so much backlash. Because he also then edited it deceptively on top of that. On top of that, then he took it and edited it and butchered it as much as he could. Tried to do a full-on 60 minutes butchering of it to try to make himself look even better. Guy's just absolutely piece of shit, scum of the world. Nobody should go on Julian Dorey's podcast. I don't know why he's a podcaster. Absolute terrible human being. I just want to make sure people understand that I've never been treated poorly in my entire life by anybody. And
I just want to say as well quickly, I obviously knew that something, well, but I'd never seen the Julian Dorey episode.
But I mean, why is he even doing this? Like, I'm just a random guy. So to even come at me like this from such a place of dishonesty without telling somebody ahead of time, he tried to get me to sign a statement that basically said that he could do whatever he wanted and defame me in any way, and that I had no legal recourse against him. That's how much of a terrible. Imagine trying to get somebody to sign something like that. And
it is strange. Yeah, it's strange behavior.
And then on top of that, so then I call up Danny Jones after that, because I'm like, dude, I just had a terrible time with the guy who's saying to be your best friend. Like, what's going on? I'm thinking about canceling the podcast. Why would I go on your podcast? Are you going to like ambush me? Nope. It's all legit. What's going on? I don't know what you're talking about. Danny Jones is a fucking idiot, by the way. Like, guy is a complete moron. I'm surprised the guy, if he passed high school, I'm honestly surprised. But I want to point out that this guy is he's the biggest snake in the world. Danny Jones is. Absolutely. So he lies to me about it, has me come out there, make sure that he pays for the hotel because Julian Dorey didn't, and then ambushes me with the corridor crew thing. And I could tell in the middle of it, he's giving me these looks, these smiles. He does a fake break, which I thought the break was legit at the time, but he just airs the break. I don't know if he thought I was like going to say something when I didn't think I was being recorded or whatever. And he was doing the same shit that Julian was doing, and I could tell in the middle of the interview. And then, too, I want to point out one thing is that when he drops this video of the corridor crew, this pre-recorded video, and none of this had ever been told to me ahead of time. Of course it hadn't.
Yeah, it didn't look like it.
And then he's trying to get a deceptive clip of me looking nervous, and he's telling me not to talk, to look still and do nothing. He's literally directing me to sit there and look nervous because he wants to get a clip of me looking nervous while I'm listening to the Corridor Crew's video, because he thought he was going to get some reaction clip.
He wanted you to watch it, right? He was saying like, watch it.
That because I had already knew everything they were saying, I was taking the notes down because I knew at that point he was going to probably edit it deceptively. So I wanted to make sure at that point I was writing the stuff down so that I could go back home and make my own video the moment I landed back in Minnesota. That was what I was doing. And so he kept saying, watch it. That's not why he wanted me to watch it. He was recording me, so he wanted me to sit there looking like, sweating, looking nervous like that. So that's 100% what he was doing. And if you ask him, he will admit it, because that's what his intention was at that time. And it was just so scummy. And the worst part was this. The Corridor crew didn't remake the videos. They failed to remake the videos. They couldn't even do it. Julian and Dorey told me they were going to do it. They couldn't. They failed. So when they failed to do that, then they made whatever this shit was, which clearly all they did was just go read Reddit from the old August investigation and just copy and paste old shit that had already been debunked. Like claims that had already been addressed months before that, they just regurgitated because they never actually looked to see what the back and forth was, including the VFX thing. When they brought that all up, I was like, that's why I'm just writing it down, because I already heard all of it. None of it was original. And the worst part was I knew they didn't do any forensic analysis because they claimed the clouds weren't moving, and all you had to do was just plug the thing into any editor, and you can see that the clouds. So it told me that these people who are claiming to be visual effects experts actually aren't even visual effects artists at all. They're just people that sit in front of a video camera and pretend to be VFX artists when they just pay other people to do the work behind the scenes. In reality, the Corridor crew people are no different than random Redditors.
Yeah, I mean I can't comment on that. I don't know really who the Corridor crew people are, but I knew this, like when I watched that video of you and you watching the Corridor crew. First of all, I want to say as well that I was actually under the impression, I'm not sure why, that Danny and Julian had apologized to you. So I wasn't expecting you to sort of unleash on them like that, because I thought that had that relationship had maybe been repaired. And I will say that I watched Danny Jones. I've always kind of liked his podcast, and that's how I found you, was that episode. But that episode, it kind of shocked me. It was a bit jarring because I was really enjoying what you were putting forward. And then when that happened, it was like a clear shift in the tone, a clear shift in character that wasn't normal for Danny. So it was very obvious for someone who was just kind of new to the whole subject that this wasn't how things normally go on this show. And then obviously with my experience in visual effects, when I was watching the Corridor crew video, it was coming across like a Mr. Beast video. It had this like weird, funny editing. These guys are all just like laughing on the couch, and like there was no real professional analysis. Like it was very strange.
But the biggest nail in the coffin, which if I would have led with this, would have made this whole discussion moot.
No,
it's not really as fun.
Do you have damning evidence as well?
I have damning testimony.
What? If you tell me that this is the shockwave.
Do we have this shockwave on our server?
We do now, actually.
Wait, what?
I found the stock footage.
You did! You got it!
It was cleverly put together to convince someone who doesn't have a good grasp of visual effects that what they're seeing is fake. But when in reality, a trained artist would see the points they're putting forward and realize that they have practically zero weight to them. So what I wanted to talk about after following on from Danny Jones is that it wasn't long. So it was around this time that you were kind of identifying who the person was who leaked these videos, but you didn't necessarily talk about it on his show. But then about 6 months after that, he actually has like a close relative of the person who you believe to be the leaker on his podcast. So can you explain exactly who that was and kind of what that timeline was following on from your interview with Danny?
And one thing I want to say is that some people may say, well, it's unfair for me to unleash on those guys. I'm going to unleash on them every single time somebody asks me about it. Those guys did the most unprofessional thing I could ever imagine, and they deserve to have their careers ended over it. Simple.
So you've never had an apology? So that I got that from, I don't know where I got that from.
Apology? No. A real apology? No. Those guys should be fucking groveling at my feet for the way they treated me.
So they've never acknowledged. They've never acknowledged the videos are real.
I would never in a million years treat a guest the way that they treated me. Never. If I didn't believe somebody's story, I wouldn't have them on my show. The intention of those guys having me on was to try to chop me down for ratings, for clicks, for money.
It did come across that way.
Like that. I would never in a million years do anything like that to anybody. It's just as simple as that. And those guys they should be ashamed of it. They should be regretful of it. They have not been apologetic enough of it. You guys can go watch the lives. The people set up a space because it was so controversial. That's the only time we've ever interacted since.
Right. Did you get an apology?
And I don't even remember what it was, but go listen to it. You'll be able to tell. Danny was terrified of saying anything because he was so terrified of his reputation and the hit on it. Julian Dorey had a full meltdown. You can listen to it. It's pretty funny if you want to be honest. And it was pretty clear that what the whole thing was and what happened was that those guys were being told behind the scenes that I'm a scammer, and they were all buying in on it, and they thought this was going to be some big, we're going to get this guy and prove how much he's a scammer or what have you. And truthfully, they're lucky they didn't get hit with defamation stuff. They're lucky that I was just a normal guy that doesn't have a huge amount of money, because if I was some billionaire or something like that, I'd have taken everything they had. And that it goes to show how shitty it is. And I hope that people remember it perfectly. And so to close out on that, I want to address something with the Corridor Crew people. I didn't know who they were. I'd never heard of them ever before. I still don't know any of their guys' names other than the guy Nico, because he was the guy on the video or what have you. But I did go look at some of their stuff, and I found out they do these kind of stupid ass like videos with little cut-ins of cartoons and stuff all the time, turns out. And they did it for the DoD Navy videos as well, the ones that are the Tic Tac and the gimbal as well. And it wasn't like they did it before those videos were released, because those videos were on the internet before they were publicly acknowledged to be real. It was actually years after they were already admitted to being real. Those guys debunked those videos as well.
Wow, that's so weird.
What? You debunked real videos? So they actually have a history of debunking real videos, which I think is odd. Now, to change over to the Edward Lin thing. Edward Lin is the guy. He legally changed his name. I didn't know about this till just recently.
It's the guy who leaked the videos, Edward Lin.
Yeah. And he's the guy. You can look into the history of it. Long story short, just ask him if you don't believe. His lawyer won't pick up my phone calls. Nobody in his sphere of influence will return any messages from me. If he wasn't the guy, those people would be trying to reach out to me to tell me to stop saying his name. So he legally changed his name after I started outing him. And the craziest part was after I found out who his sister was and finally tracked down his sister. It was hard to find her, Jenny Lynn Naylor, because she got married a while back, many years back, actually. But the craziest part was that she is a Homeland Security lawyer that specializes in countering weapons of mass destruction. And she's married to Sean Naylor, who is this mainstream media journalist, possible spook. And he was on Danny Jones like less than a year ago. And on it, he's talking about how the CIA justifies like extrajudicial killings in foreign countries and how the president would have to be made aware. Like basically, if I were just to take that information and extrapolate to Mh370, basically saying that President Obama would have to know about this kind of operation if it was going down, either then or after the fact. And I'm just sitting here going, what are the odds that Danny Jones, one of the two people, and they're like the only two people before or since who've tried to do this weird takedown on me, that they try to do this takedown, and now Danny's interviewing this seemingly obscure guy that's the brother-in-law of the guy I've identified as the leaker of the videos.
So his wife is the sister of the guy who leaked the videos.
Exactly. And when Edward Lin was in pretrial detainment before his court case, because they were terrified that he was going to yell to the media, whatever it was that he leaked that was such a huge national security issue. The sister, their family was setting up a website saying Edward Lin did nothing wrong. Edward Lin's not a traitor. He's not a spy. He would never do anything like this. They were saying that the media or the military was lying about the situation, the circumstances. They were obscuring the situation. So I was tracking her down and be like, hey, I want to exonerate your brother, right? Weren't you trying to say that your brother did nothing wrong? And now that I realized he leaked these videos and I understand the circumstances around it, it makes total sense on how this all played out. And now she doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Why does she not want to talk? Because he took a plea deal. The plea deal almost certainly says that he can't talk about those videos ever again. He'll go back to prison if he does. So he's terrified of me. And so is his family members, because they probably know, they maybe not know exactly what it is he leaked, but they know it was a big deal. And they know that if he talks about it, he's going to go back to prison.
So I want you to explain how you made that connection. Like, how did you realize that this Edward Lin was the person who is Regicide Anon, who uploaded these videos?
He's not Regicide Anon. There's no way he can be Regicide Anon, but he's somebody else that knew Regicide Anon, or somehow the videos got to Regicide Anon through him. It almost certainly was an indirect leak. We can tell from the circumstances of how he's being treated after he's been out of prison. If this guy was a traitor, there's no way he's making videos on YouTube like we caught like a few months ago, where he's like proudly talking about his time in the U.S. Navy. using his picture under his new name now, using his old picture as Edward Lynn from the Navy, the same one that people used in the court trials, in the media articles about the court trials against him.
But in those trials, though, they didn't, like, obviously, these trials weren't explicitly stating you leaked videos of MH370 getting zapped. So what I'm asking, and I want you to explain for the audience, is how did you work out that this was the guy?
The lawyer said, his defense lawyer said that the evidence in question is available on the internet. He triggered a national security alert at the highest levels. The government didn't release him in pretrial detainment because they were afraid he was going to go to the media. They were terrified of the case going to trial and wanted a plea deal because they were afraid of something called gray mail, where the defendant just goes in the middle of the trial and just yells out what it is that they're supposedly leaked because it's so damaging to the United States military. So what is it available on the internet that triggered a national security alert at the highest possible levels? But at the same time, there's no evidence that Edward Lynn exchanged any evidence with anyone from any other country. So what it is that they're going at against for Edward Lynn perfectly matches up with the profile of the videos. The person that leaked those videos isn't a Chinese spy. If that was a Chinese spy, we're going to see the drone in the video, right? Why are they cropping the drone out? How do they even have access to these videos? It's U.S. military. So the reason why they're going after Edward Lynn is Edward Lynn also in the court, what they do say, they don't say much, but they say they have proclivity for talking about weapons systems and things like that. And he was in the right position to have access to the black budget portfolio, so he would know about this stuff. So what if he just had this habit of just recording stuff he shouldn't be recording to save it? And then what if he just showed it to somebody and they just put it on the internet, or they gave it to somebody to put it on the internet, right? This would have explained why so Edward Lynn was technically responsible, but he didn't have malicious intent. Because when I look at that video, that's the kind of video that I would show somebody to show off. But it's not the kind of video I'm showing somebody to, expose the U.S. military. Like, why are they cropping the HUD data out? Like, there's no HUD data in either of those videos. We should see altitude data, time, etc. Right? So they're not showing that because that stuff can lead back to direct individuals. But this general information can solve the mystery. It does imply the government's responsible and knows more than they know, but we don't know exactly which people are responsible other than Edward Lynn, and he probably knows.
So Edward Lynn, he's this high-level Navy guy, and what were the charges against him? Like, what was the case for that was publicly known?
That's the thing. It started as espionage, but they weirdly had this prostitution charge in there. It's because they did a sting on him, an FBI sting, because they didn't have any evidence. And they had no evidence he was a spy at all. So they ended up having to admit they had never had any evidence he was a spy. So you're like, what is this all about? What story makes sense for what is that he did? Heck, there are spy cases where they just tell you exactly what they did. There was one recently where it was like, oh, this guy gave like sensitive information to China, was getting $15,000 every time he did it. It's like, okay, why don't you just... So what are they afraid of telling us here? There's another case recently where a guy was facing the death penalty for stealing satellite information. So why can't they tell us what it is that Edward Lynn leaked?
Yeah.
So the answer seems pretty straightforward. And why did he only get 6 years after a plea deal? It shaved 3 years off. He got 9 years and they shaved 3 years off. Why did he get this slap on the wrist? Well, it's actually not. If he leaked the videos, it's a slap on the wrist. If all he did was just leak classified information, which is all that stuck after the plea deal, then he got way too much time. For just dissemination of classified information, he should have only got less than a year. He got 9 years. They even, during the appeal, because when he appealed this, he argued that. And the judge just said that what he did was super serious. They had to have military members come and testify why it was so serious. And no one could look at the evidence unless they passed these extra classifications. So even the lawyers had to get these classifications just to review the evidence.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think the connection, the fact that Danny Jones seemingly out of nowhere kind of got you on the show with this hit piece, and then to 6 months or whatever it was later, he's got the brother-in-law of the person you're sort of pointing the finger at, kind of justifying these wild things that the United States does under the guise of national security and black budgets and things like that. Now,
one more thing I always want to address on real quick as well is that all these UFO people, the UFO disclosure people, are always constantly talking about how whistleblowers need to be safe to come out and talk. This is the reason why I'm destroying Danny Jones and Julian Dorey. Why their careers must be destroyed. People should not come out with something so sensational like this and then have people trying to end them like those guys tried to do to me. That should never happen, because when that happens, that's how you suppress information like this. Heck, these videos might be some of the only real things Julie and Danny have ever had on their show. So it's absolutely just unacceptable to act like that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a really good point. In the age of disclosure and where we are trying to get people to come forward with the truth, those kind of things definitely don't help.
Can you imagine if somebody's coming forward with like, Danny Jones interviewed a guy that claimed that he lost his virginity to an alien and like they had an alien baby or some shit like that. Can you imagine that guy's on the show doing that, bearing his soul to Danny Jones, and Danny Jones has somebody come in an alien suit with a pregnancy belly and go, "Look, we found your wife. There they are." Can you imagine?
Yeah,
like
I think
gross.
That's what I found. That's what I found really strange was that, like I said, I'd watched Danny plenty of times before your episode, and because he did interview, weird, interesting people who had these kind of crazy claims and fringe ideas, and that's why I enjoyed the show, because he was willing to believe and entertain people with these wild claims, and that's why it felt like such a shock when like he's willing, to talk to people like Whitley Strieber, who wants to, has these wild claims about aliens and whatever. But then when you came on, it was just like it just felt totally out of character. It didn't feel normal. But anyway, I want to keep moving because I am conscious of the time that we have. Let's talk about the open letter video. So this video surfaced online at the beginning of 2024, I believe, and it's essentially just an audio using what sounds like an AI voice, and it was just uploaded to YouTube, but it was addressed to you personally.
I work or have worked at a military base in the Maldives, and I know exactly what happened to Malaysian Airlines Mh370. This is also a letter to Ashton Forbes. You are not wrong, and what you do are much bigger than you even can imagine. Don't stop what you are doing. I won't tell anything about myself more than that I currently or in the past has spent time at a military base in the Maldives. That I have done this type of work since I joined the military when I was young, and that was many decades ago. Still in the game, but the years are starting to get to me. I write this because I want the world to know that most of the trouble on Earth are created for political reasons. United States, or at least a covert administrative elite of the U.S., has, at will, complete control, and this has been true since the 60s. Flight Mh370 arrived at our base, by our hand, at 1856 UTC after we picked it up, mid-air, outside the island of Great Nicobar. Just one of many, many things we do. We can pick up anything, anywhere, and deliver it in an instant, like a magic FedEx.
I really found the angle of this very interesting, because obviously people can say, look, it's just an AI voice. Anybody could have made this, and okay, fair enough. We have to accept that. But the angle of the tone and the language used in this video, I found really interesting, because it wasn't. I mean, I want to ask you just quickly: did anything in that video like reveal new information to you, or did it just kind of confirm what you had already been researching and sort of encouraged you to keep going with it?
Yeah, good question. So, so the October, November, December, January roller coaster. Wow. I mean, so you had the October, Salvatore Pais gets scheduled. I don't remember when that came out. I think it came out right after Danny Jones dropped. So you have the Danny Jones thing. People after the Danny Jones thing were actually polarized against Danny Jones. Those guys did not anticipate the negative response that they were going to get either. They were completely blindsided by it. And so things actually got even bigger after that. Then December rolls around. We've hit the highest we've ever hit. Kim.com weirdly starts like trying to, not really promoting the case, but ties himself to me. Only we find out to try to jump onto these satellite photos and try to discredit the case. which is crazy because Kim.com's facing, I found out later, 181 years in the United States prison, and they're currently extraditing him right now as well. So he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. So they have him by the balls. So pretty wild that he was the guy that tried to connect himself to me. And then, so December, the cloud picture things goes down. So now we're at the lowest point ever. Everybody's saying there must be these cloud pictures. Everybody's ignoring the fact there can't be cloud pictures. And then January rolls around. I'm actually, after the cloud picture thing, I was actually thinking like, yeah, I know these videos are real, but like, man, they really don't want these videos to come out. Like, imagine that whole saga I just explained. Imagine going through all that and realizing like, yeah, they're really trying to knock at these videos to come out. And I'm going to have to go through absolute hell. Even Salvatore Pais literally told me this. He's like, you're going to have to go through hell to try to get anyone to admit those videos are real. I still remember those words directly from Hard Truths podcast #1. And that's when all of a sudden someone says, Ashton, you got to check out this YouTube account. Go to the YouTube account, Diego Garcia Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes. And I'm just going, what? Can't be. Like, what is this, right? 11 minutes long. Click, start listening to it. Right away, the AI voice is really good. In fact, I can hear breath sounds in the AI voice. I hear it. And the story the AI that the letter tells me is incredible. And I can tell right away that the letter is not produced by AI. A human wrote the letter. It has creativity in it. There's just no way AI can do that yet at the moment. And it's not just somebody that took my work. It's hard for people on the outside to realize this, but as somebody that knows my own work intimately, it was not just a simple taking of my work and rehashing it. It added details in there that I don't know if I can verify them. Like the time the plane was received at 56 UTC, that's like 13 to 16 minutes after we think the plane's being zapped. So where are they? Where is that? Is that Diego Garcia? Is that somebody somewhere else? Not sure. I can't think of many other details off the top of my head about, the fire scenario. So the big thing was that I, at the time, was saying that this was a rescue attempt. The plane was on fire, and the United States apparently just rescues planes with orbs. But this letter says, no. Remember those engineers that you looked into? Those people are the motive. You were correct. This was a message to China. And the reason why you can't just, like, a message to China is something that's so abstract. I can't just assume, this was some message. You assume something more tangible, right? So the letter was saying that this was a message to China, not to mess with the United States. We were fed up, whatever. These engineers were the reason why. And when I start researching around, I find out that Joseph P. Farrell actually suggested this. The Joseph P. Farrell that's known for like Giza power research and plasma stuff, he had speculated this. But actually, he didn't follow through on his speculation. But there was an audio recording interview with him a couple days after the plane disappeared of him speculating exactly this. Speculating that maybe the United States was sending a message to someone else. Maybe they used teleportation technology. He literally used those words. And then he says, but the only problem, the reason why I'm hesitant is because of how much energy it would take to pull off. Well, we're watching the videos, we're realizing they found a low energy way to do it. And then he says, he even points out the semiconductor engineers. He just says, but if you're trying to get rid of these people, just shoot a missile at it. Why do all this stuff? Because this is a more elaborate play than just shooting a missile at it. This is a play where you're telling them we can disappear things off the face of the earth and you're never going to know. And we can cover it up. We can cover it up to the public because that's the most terrifying thing. Because that's the type of thing where you're going and checking your closet every time to make sure nobody's hiding in there. The boogeyman is coming after you, kind of stuff.
Yeah. And what I found really interesting about that letter is the fact that, like you said, not only does it kind of add in these little details that connect the dots that you already had, but it also tracks with a lot of other, conspiracy theories and fringe concepts outside of MH370. Obviously free energy, UFO technology. And also the big one is a deep state or some kind of shadow organization that's kind of really pulling the strings in our world. I wanted to ask you, though, have you ever considered the alternative, right? Because if we look at the timeline, Danny Jones, Julian, Dorey, this thing happens where it feels like something or someone is trying to kind of assassinate your character. And then that kind of backfires, right? It actually people feel like that they were dicks to you and it doesn't really go to plan. And then this pops up. Have you ever considered that maybe the story that this letter is saying is trying to, because we know, like, Project Blue Book, for example, America loves to pop up and steer the narrative in a direction that they're happy with it going if they can't get rid of it. So have you considered that maybe they're trying to steer it in a way that is kind of like a half truth, but maybe isn't the full truth?
Of course, I've considered every possibility. I'm not the type of person that just gets obsessed with certain opinion or outcome. I'm the type of person that always is reevaluating their opinions based on updates to the information. And so I was very scared of that letter at first because of all those things that had happened. And I'm going, okay, I've got literally Kim.com, some influencers, millions of followers, like just seemingly trying to take me down. I've got podcasters trying to take me down. I've got the intelligence communities planting photos on the internet to try to convince people the videos are fake. I was terrified. And when this letter comes, the reason why I was pretty sure right away that was not the case is because of the encouragement. The way the letter is saying, keep going, is saying, hi, Ashton, impressive. That's not how somebody who's trying to take you down acts. They can't hide their disdain when people do it like that. Genuine goodwill like that only comes from a place of goodwill. It's super hard for scummy people to act that way because it's not honest when they do it. So that letter and the way that it chided me about the Miami Mall aliens like twice in the letter. That's how
Yes, I wanted to talk about that.
this is somebody that's either legit or it's one of my some type of super follower. And I couldn't even be a super follower because even my super followers get a lot of the details wrong. Even you got a few of the details wrong in this interview that I corrected earlier, right? So think about how hard it would be to get all the details right to convince me out of all the people that are out there. And so I've listened to that letter over 50 times easily. It's the most compelling letter I've ever listened to in my life, and I surely hope I don't get a more convincing one than that because it terrified me. Because like you said, it says there's a deep state that controls this world, and they control the media and the perception of events and has the whole world eating out of the palm of their hands. And that's exactly what happened with Mh370. So of course it's real. I know it's real, not because of the letter, but because I know that that's real. And then the reason why I know the letter's real now is because it actually is a low energy phase transition that's happening in those videos. That's actually what's happening in the videos, a low energy phase transition. And they were saying that this is plasmoid technology and it's not just teleportation. They can do lots of stuff with it. And they even say, you need to talk to Randall Carlson, who I didn't even know. He was the gray bearded man, for people wondering. I didn't even know.
Yeah.
People were like, you're trolling. You don't know who he was. They thought I was like a spook because I didn't know who Randall Carlson was. And yeah, I find out he's got these clips talking about plasmoids. And this was before I even know it was all about plasma. And so now looking back at it, I listen to the letter and I go, that's why recently I just said thank you to the person who sent that, because I wouldn't be in this position without that letter. No question, no doubt. That letter kicked me in the butt and said, I was thinking about giving up on everything and just going, you know what? I'm going to leverage this following I got and be a person that posts stupid UFO videos or whatever, right? And I thought about it because trying to convince people is going to be like going through hell, even though I still knew you're real. And that letter told me, you just can't stop. There is no stopping. At the end of the letter, it says, how do you stop somebody that has like unlimited power, right? And the answer is you talk about them and you don't stop talking. And that's the only way. That's how do we defeat them? Yeah,
it's interesting as well because the whole, talk and don't stop talking, that's kind of like what we hear in the UFO space as well, is that, these people who are stuck on the other side and in these programs that can't figure out a way to get out, they want this conversation to be happening. They want people to keep talking about it. I wanted to ask you something, and I want you to just give me a one-word answer here, Ashton. Do you feel like the consensus of reality is managed and controlled?
Yes.
I would agree with you on that. Now, just quickly, I wanted to touch on the other thing that you brought up, actually, the Miami alien incident. But now I found it interesting that they referenced that because in that video, after they say, you talk a lot about the Miami alien incident, and then they specifically say it's much deeper than that. So I wanted to, because I know that, and we spoke about this on your show last week about Ross kind of saying, oh, Ashton thinks it's aliens that teleported the plane. I don't necessarily think that, but I'm curious if you do think that this does have something to do with aliens or, non-human intelligence, because, in lots of UFO videos, and this is something I've noticed even before I sort of made the connection to the MH370 stuff, 3 orbs in the sky are like almost always sighted in a triangular formation. And I've shown the videos on my channel before too, especially around the New Jersey drone time, because there were just so many orb videos to look at. So often you see orbs, plasmoids, balls of light, whatever you want to call them, in a set of 3, and they're in a triangular formation, and they might be moving, but the way they're moving, it's like they are rigid. It's like they are stuck in this formation that is either kind of turning on some kind of axis, or however it's moving, those 3 balls are stuck in that position. So, I think it definitely could be secret US tech, and I know that's kind of the way you lean with it, and I'm definitely open to that. But I'm curious, do you think maybe there is some kind of NHI involvement in this?
Yeah. So, starting with the 3 orbs thing, that was something that I had noticed coming into the zeitgeist from 2017, and maybe a little bit before that. I think the first time I started seeing a lot of orb videos was like 2010-ish, on that way forward. Like, looking back historically, there's the Madrid video that people point out a lot of time. It looks like this as well. There's been a couple. There's an Atlanta video. Or I don't know if it's exactly Atlanta, but there's a plane where you can see some orbs. And yes, they look like they're locked in a triangle formation. And I remember thinking back then that, like, this doesn't look like flying saucers. Why have we gone from flying saucers to now seeing these orbs of light? And what are they? I didn't actually think they were legit back then. And now I realize they're legit. They're just plasma. Maybe there's something inside, but it's mostly just plasma. And how are they locking together? It's actually just simple magnetism. It's a magnet inverter. So a magnet inverter uses both magnetic polarities, a positive and a minus, one wrapped around the other. And when you do that and you put these next to each other, I shouldn't do that because there's conspiracy followers. They go like this and they lock in, but they repel after a certain point. And so what they're going to do is they're going to say stuck in a perfect equilateral triangle. And what that would mean is all 3 are exactly the same. Because if there was a discrepancy, the triangle would not be equilateral. So I thought that was incredible. As in terms of the videos, the reason why the videos are not being popularized by many of the UFO people is because they know it's not aliens. Because those videos, them being in operation, shows that we control that. I think that if there was an angle where those videos don't show the US government controlling the orbs, then people would be all over it. People would be saying, yeah, look at these, aliens zapped it. It's because it's not something where we can just blame it on aliens. We have to people are actually going to go to prison, potentially. I mean, if there was a just world, but it's not, because we live in a controlled fake world. And for me, I'm not going to believe aliens are visiting until I see one at this point. Actually, 2 years ago, if you talked to me right before this, I would have said aliens are probably visiting us. Now I'm not going to believe it until I see it, just because I've seen how much they can psyop us now. But that doesn't mean I believe aliens are out there. And if I believe teleportation is possible, I believe aliens can visit us. No problem. If distance is not an issue, why can aliens not get here? To me, the answer actually gets bigger than that. The letter basically says, the story goes that the aliens have this advanced technology, but they don't want to give it to us because we're too rowdy of a civilization. We haven't achieved the enlightenment yet to handle this technology. And then the letter says, that part's made up, the alien part, but the rest of it's true. It's just us again. It's us saying that, because if any 2 warring factions, humans, got this technology, say goodbye to this planet. And we're not talking nukes. We're not talking new bang. We're talking boom, planet's not here anymore. Goodbye. Right? We're talking creating a singularity, creating a black hole that can suck away the entire planet instantly. So the last thing I want to say in the letter is, yes, I was cautious initially. As time has gone on and nobody came out to say, hey, I tricked you with that letter, I've gotten more and more confident. And as I've learned about the physics and learned that the stuff being said in there is real, I become very confident that the letter is real. But that doesn't mean every detail is real. Keep in mind, this stuff is so compartmentalized, I'd be surprised, unless you're at the very top, if any one person knows the true story. They just probably
100%.
know bits and pieces based on where their experience was and like who they talked to and blah, blah, blah. And by the way, Robert J. O'Neill, the guy who shot Osama bin Laden, he was also part of the Alabama Maersk, the Captain Phelps movie operation, SEAL Team 6. He actually, on September 8th of this last year, said that Malaysian Airlines was never a mystery. It was a message to China or a warning to China. So
I remember that, actually. I remember seeing that.
He's basically everything from the Malaysian flight that went away. I'm convinced that was a shot at China. Don't mess with us. That's 6th generation war.
So look, I just had a couple of, I had 2 quick questions here that actually came from the Weirdos, which is like the channel members for Polarity. I think we kind of covered one of them here, but I'll just sort of re-ask you again in case you want to touch on anything else. Do you think there is a transnational criminal like breakaway civilization that is sort of controlling all of this from the shadows? I guess, yeah, you could call it like a deep state, or do you have sort of a different theory or alternative theory to that?
No, I think it's a deep state. I just think it's more complex than what people think. I think it's like certain people in select positions that are exposed to it, that their minds are open. If you're the kind of person that doesn't believe this stuff's possible, then they're happy to not convince you and you to live in, like Cypher in the Matrix and ignorance is bliss. And if you don't want to be read in on it, then they're happy to not have you be read on it. So, and I do think that it does cross nations. Like, why is it that China or Russia is not disclosing that this technology, that these aliens or whatever exists? Why are they not disclosing it? Because everybody's in on this game at the same time, and it's them versus us. It's the little people versus the big people, pretty much. When it comes to alien stuff, my true opinion, just if I had to ask right now, I'd say, yeah, we probably dug this technology up is the most likely answer. I think digging it up is a little bit more likely than them crashing, although I think we can shoot them out of the sky as well with just radar waves. But I think we dug it up, we found it, and we started working on it, and that we don't have the material science to make like a flying saucer that is like a Star Trek replicator would be required. But we do have the material science to figure out how the physics worked. And then we found plasma was basically like the training wheels for the technology. And we could do that, kind of like how we can make fire, but we might not be able to make an iPhone, right? So I think we figured that out. And then I think that opens the door to the bigger answer, the questions in the universe on why are we here and what's our exact place in it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said how people who are not willing to, people who aren't interested in this stuff, they're more than willing to just not read them in because it's like, why bother? Because I'm sure you listened to Hal Puthoff's interview on Joe Rogan this week, where he said it was interesting how the further up the chain he went with briefing people, the more open-minded they became. Like it was easier to brief the people at the top on all of this ESP psychic research rather than the people at the bottom who would just be like, get the fuck out of here with that, which is, it tracks with what you're saying.
Yeah, that's the hard part is this is like, I've been surprised at how people have reacted. It's been so different than what I would have expected ahead of time. Like I tell people a lot that I expected the right wing people to reject it and the left wing people to embrace it. It was the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in terms of going up the ladder, I've been in calls, meetings, etc., and listen to people where people just talk about this stuff openly behind the scenes, where you would just be like, wait, what the hell is this so different than how people talk about it publicly? And I guess that's the thing, is that why would you waste your time trying to convince somebody? Is like, how are they able to compartmentalize it? Because the people that don't believe it's real, they look for excuses not to believe it. And then the reason why it more and more higher up the chain you go is because there's more and more people that are exposed to it, that are open-minded, that realize it, that the military has technology. Even Hal Puthoff in that interview said, like, yeah, we've got some neat toys, behind the scenes. What's he talking about? What is that? Right? Like people actually wonder, like, what is he talking about? So yeah.
All right, one last question. What is your theory on when this plane was teleported? Like, what happened to the people inside? Now, I think we can all obviously agree that, well, I mean, there's an idea that, they're just no longer here anymore. Or I think there's a theory that maybe it'll appear back one day at some point in the future. But there's also the fact that we didn't actually mention is that a lot of the people who were on this plane, their phone was still ringing days after the plane went missing, which, if your phone gets smashed and destroyed or goes to the bottom of the ocean, it certainly doesn't ring. So what's your theory on what happened in this teleportation event?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the fire sadly killed most of the people, if not all of them. And that's probably why we didn't see people coming out on TV going, I'm this person that was on board that plane from 5, 10, 11 years ago, whatever. And it's crazy, but for some reason, my intuition when I look at that says this is not unlimited technology. Like, we're trying to figure this out. It's not a test, but it's not the first time we've used this technology. And it's limited to planet Earth. Now, I don't think it always limited to that, but the current iteration is potentially limited to planet Earth. And by that, I just mean that, like, you potentially need a plasma orb in your destination to send the plane, and the airplane can't really survive on Mars, right? So you are kind of limited from that perspective. So everything we see about it would seem that this plane is being teleported somewhere else on Earth. And then to your point about the phones ringing, yeah, phones I don't think are going to ring in the bizarro dimension, but I'm not sure. And then the debris. People forget the debris. People ask me about the debris. The debris is in the wrong continent. In fact, there's no chance that debris washed there from the South Indian Ocean. They did some physical analysis, the CSIRO drift models. I looked at the physical data, finally. It took a while. It's so hard to get to the actual physical results because it's shrouded in so much bullshit about models. The debris only drifted 2 kilometers per day on average, at most. At most. Much of it drifted less. The ones that they threw in the water to replicate. In order to get to Africa, it needs to average 5 to 7 kilometers every day in a straight line. So no chance, not in this universe, that the debris came from the South Indian Ocean and ended up in Africa. So what does this mean? That plane must have shown up somewhere else, closer to Africa, and either some pieces fell off of it, or wherever that plane ended up, if it did crash, it crashed somewhere closer to Africa. And if it landed at Diego Garcia, then they just took some pieces off of it and threw them in the water. And then they drifted from Diego Garcia to Africa. And that's the answer, is that what do we need to be fake? The only evidence to be fake in the whole story is the Inmarsat satellite pings. That's it. The whole story changes. And then the whole story is now a fire event and the United States government teleporting the plane with some orbs and no plane ever crashing into the ocean.
Well, man, I think that's probably a good point to wrap things up. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just want to thank you for your audience. And yeah, it probably came down a little harsh on Julian and Danny, but I don't want you to edit it out because I want people to know that I don't take kindly to that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to back down from it. And if those guys do want to have a chat about it at some point in the future and how this is all played out in retrospective, I'd be down for it. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. And no, I won't edit it out. I think you deserve to have your platform to share what had happened because I didn't know that. I didn't know the ins and outs of how it went, and I don't know if many other people do, but I think it was clear as someone who at the time wasn't even a content creator, was just a viewer like millions of other people. It's something about it felt off. So even for me, on just a personal level, it was good to kind of get a bit more of an understanding of the situation, and good for you to have the platform to say it. And, you know, if Danny Jones ever wanted to come on this channel and say his part, he'd be more than welcome to as well, because I'm a fan of his too. So yeah, I thank you for your time, man. We did 2.5 hours, which was more than we said. So I appreciate you hanging around and coming on.
No problem. Thanks, Josh.
All right. Take care, man.
Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on?
No matter how far you go into the dark, when you flip, you go exactly the same place to the light in our galaxy. Everything. Because everything is in balance. Everything is a polarity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.